My name's Isaac, and I'm 30 now, but some memories don't fade. They ferment, get sharper with time. I don't talk about my childhood much. Not because I've forgotten, but because saying it out loud makes it feel real again. Like I'm 12 and standing in the middle of that gas station parking lot all over again. Clutching a candy bar I didn't have money to pay for, watching my parents' taillights vanish into the night. It happened in August, right before school started. We'd gone on one of those awkward, family bonding trips my mom always insisted we needed. Except bonding, in our house, meant everyone pretending my dad's rants were wisdom and my older brother Caleb's every mediocre thought was a gift to mankind. I was the quiet one, too sensitive, too soft-spoken, always in the way. On that particular day, I'd spilled a Sprite in the back seat. Caleb, who was 16 then and already a master at deflecting blame, smirked and said I did it on purpose. Dad pulled over at the next gas station off the highway, eyes blazing. "You're not a baby anymore," he barked. "You want to act grown, you can figure your own way home." At first I laughed. I thought it was one of his twisted jokes. But then the back of the SUV slammed shut, and they just drove. I ran after them for a second, calling their names, but my voice cracked and disappeared under the roar of engines and tires. A clerk poked his head out from the gas station door, cigarette dangling from his lips, and gave me a look like I was just another stray someone had dumped. That night, I slept behind the station's dumpster, curled into myself, heart pounding every time a car passed. I remember counting the hours. 80 miles from home. No money. No phone. Not a single soul to call. The clerk refused to help when I asked. "Ain't a daycare, kid," he muttered. I didn't cry. I think that part of me froze that night, the part that believed family meant anything unshakable. Eventually, I found a payphone the next morning and called a teacher I trusted, Mrs. Valencia. She was the one who picked me up and took me back to town. I told her my parents must have forgotten me. She didn't believe it. I could tell by the way she tightened her grip on the steering wheel. But she didn't press. She just dropped me off, made sure I had food, and told me I could always call her. When I walked through the front door of our house, no one looked surprised. No one said sorry. Mom glanced up from her laptop and said, "Took you long enough." Caleb was on the couch playing video games and muttered, "Should have walked faster." Dad never even acknowledged it happened. Just nodded at me the next morning at breakfast like everything was normal. That was the day I stopped trying to belong. I finished high school like a ghost in the hallway. Ate lunch alone. Studied in silence. I got out as soon as I turned 18. Worked 3 jobs. Put myself through community college, then transferred to a university across the country without telling anyone. I changed my number, never left a forwarding address, and for the first time, started breathing on my own. I've spent the last decade building a life they know nothing about. I became a software engineer. Moved to a city where no one ever said the words "man up" like it was a cure for trauma. I have friends who think of me as grounded and loyal. I even adopted a rescue dog named Max, a skittish little mutt who flinches at raised voices. We understand each other. I never thought I'd hear from them again. But last week, a letter showed up at my apartment. No return address, but the handwriting on the front, loopy, dramatic, was unmistakably Mom's. I opened it slowly, half expecting some legal threat or another passive-aggressive note about abandoning the family. But instead, it was a thick envelope. Inside, a wedding invitation from Caleb. Engraved in gold lettering, all showy and traditional. The kind of thing that screamed rented elegance and fake smiles. And tucked inside was a folded piece of notebook paper. Handwritten. From them. "Isaac, we know things have been distant between us, but Caleb is getting married, and it would mean a lot to the family if you could attend. He asked that we reach out to you personally. We hope you'll come. We'd love to reconnect." Mom and Dad. Reaching out. Like nothing ever happened. Like they hadn't left me to rot behind a gas station dumpster when I was 12 and never once apologized. Like Caleb wasn't the golden boy whose shadow I was never allowed to step out of. I sat there staring at the note for a long time. My fingers tightened around the edge of the paper until it crinkled. And for a moment, I almost tossed it into the trash. Almost. But then, something in me paused. I flipped the invitation over. Fancy venue. Outdoor ceremony. Dress code. Formal. There was even a QR code to RSVP. As if I were just another distant relative. As if they hadn't taught me what it meant to be disposable. I stared at the note again. It would mean a lot to the family. Interesting. because I wasn't the same kid they dumped on the side of the highway anymore. And if they wanted me back in the picture, I had a few ideas about how I could frame it. Let's just say I didn't RSVP right away, but I did start planning. Quietly, carefully, like I always have. Because some debts don't get paid in words, they get paid in presence. And sometimes, showing up is the loudest thing you can do. The moment I saw Caleb's fiance's name, Emily R. Kensington, printed in embossed cursive on the invitation, I knew exactly what kind of wedding this was going to be. Upper middle class perfection, long games, live quartet, personalized cocktail napkins with their initials. The Kensingtons were local royalty back in my hometown. Old money, old gossip, old grudges. I remembered Emily vaguely from school, always dressed like she was heading to church or a job interview, even at age 15. The kind of girl who never had to fight for attention because it was given to her like an inheritance. So Caleb landed her. Of course he did. The charming oldest son, quarterback smile, parents who orbited around him like he was the sun. My parents probably wore their approval like jewelry. I looked her up online that same night. She was everything you'd expect. Dental school grad, curated Instagram with inspirational quotes and cappuccino art, engagement photos under a tree that looked like it came from a wedding magazine. And there, buried in the tags of one post, was a link to their wedding website. I clicked it. Welcome to Caleb and Emily's big day. Countdown, 3 weeks. Location, Stonebrook Vineyard and Lodge. Registry, Bloomingdale's, Crate and Barrel, Amazon. Dress code, black tie optional. Please arrive 30 minutes before the ceremony begins. Shuttle transportation available from the guest hotel. We are so excited to celebrate with friends and family. Family, right. There was even a section titled The Love Story. Caleb had written it himself. Or, at least, it was written from his perspective. It was all so polished it could have been written by a PR firm. I was always the kind of guy who believed in fate. But nothing prepared me for Emily. Her grace, her kindness, the way she looked at me and saw more than just the guy I used to be. More than the guy you used to be? I read that line 3 times. And then I remembered what he used to be. A bully in khakis. A liar with a halo. The same boy who'd once pushed me into a pond at my own 12th birthday party and told our parents I slipped. I had to walk home soaked while everyone else ate cake. They laughed about it for years. I wasn't planning to go to the wedding. Not until I saw that line. Because here was Caleb, rewriting his own history. Pretending there was no collateral damage in the path he took to manhood. And now the same people who left me behind, literally, were calling me family again. I didn't RSVP online. That would have been too easy. Instead, I used an old friend from college, Jenny, who now works in logistics, to send me a high-end formal suit. Custom fit, midnight blue, with a vest that looked like it belonged in a James Bond film. I even booked a room at the same luxury guest hotel listed on the site, paying up front and under a slightly different name. I didn't want them to know I was coming. Not yet. I figured if they were going to try to pretend the past didn't exist, I'd give them a taste of their own game. 2 weeks before the wedding, I sent a single email to the RSVP address provided. It was Emily's, saying, "Looking forward to the celebration. Please don't mention I'm attending. I'd like to surprise the happy couple. Isaac." No reply, but it was marked as read. The week leading up to the wedding, I cleared my schedule, prepped my dog Max with a sitter, and packed light. Just the suit, a pair of polished shoes, and one old photo, folded and worn, of me at 12 years old, standing outside that gas station, with a backpack and a blank stare. Mrs. Valencia had taken it the morning she picked me up. She'd printed it years later and mailed it to me with a note that simply said, "You survived." I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but it felt right to bring it. When I arrived at the vineyard the day before the wedding, the place looked like a set from a movie. Rolling hills, polished wooden beams, fairy lights strung through archways. Perfect weather, perfect people. Every detail was calculated to broadcast warmth and elegance, but the kind that excluded people like me by design. The rehearsal dinner was in full swing. I watched from a quiet corner of the outdoor terrace, sunglasses on, suit jacket folded over my arm. No one noticed me at first. And then I saw her. Mom. She looked thinner than I remembered, like a balloon that had slowly deflated but tried to maintain its shape. Her hair was dyed a deeper brown, almost reddish, and she wore a pearl necklace that clashed with her sunburnt neckline. She was laughing, that high, brittle laugh that always sounded like she was trying to convince everyone she was fine. And beside her, Dad, wearing a blazer that probably still had the same money clip in the inside pocket. The one he used to flick open dramatically whenever he wanted to remind us he was providing. His face was puffier than I remembered, like life had finally started pushing back. They were talking to Emily's parents, smiling, shaking hands, praising Caleb with that same sugary tone that once made my skin crawl. I didn't approach them. Not yet. But then Caleb turned, and for the first time in almost 2 decades, we locked eyes. And his face dropped. Not enough to alert anyone else. But I saw it. The flicker. The unspoken, "What is he doing here?" that passed across his perfectly groomed expression. He raised a glass at me, hesitated, then quickly turned away like he hadn't seen me at all. But I knew he had. And more importantly, now I knew he hadn't told them I was coming. I slipped out before the toast, walked back to the hotel, heart buzzing with adrenaline. My hands were shaking slightly, not with fear, but with anticipation. They had asked me to come. They wanted me to be part of the family again. I was about to show them exactly what that meant. And I hadn't even opened my mouth yet. The morning of the wedding arrived cloaked in mist and tension. I stood at the floor-length window of my hotel room, watching fog roll across the Vineyard Hills like something out of a movie. I barely slept. Not from nerves. I wasn't nervous, but from memory. My mind replayed it all like a silent reel. The cold pavement behind the gas station, the look on Mrs. Valencia's face when she pulled up, the silence at home when I returned. I ironed my shirt slowly, deliberately, pressing out every crease like it was a scar I could flatten. Then I reached for the old photo. Folded. Faded. 12-year-old me staring into the distance, eyes wide with something between fear and disbelief. I slid it into my breast pocket, behind a silk square, close to my chest. The shuttle to the vineyard was full of guests who didn't know me. Distant cousins, old neighbors, Emily's college friends. Everyone chattered about the venue, the view, the dress. No one looked my way. I preferred it that way. When I stepped off the shuttle, the place had transformed. White chairs fanned out across the grass like dominoes. A floral arch stood center stage, thick with ivory roses and pale greenery. Classical music floated in the air, and waiters passed around glasses of Prosecco like it was liquid gold. It was, frankly, stunning. I kept to the back. I saw them again. My parents, now seated in the front row, beaming at guests, shaking hands with the officiant. Dad laughed too loudly. Mom clutched a bouquet of white lilies that didn't suit her at all. Caleb stood off to the side in a tailored tuxedo, talking to someone I assumed was his best man. And Emily, well, she hadn't appeared yet. That's when it happened. An older woman, elegant, silver hair, a navy blue dress, approached me. She stared at me for a beat, then smiled politely. "You must be Isaac." I blinked. "I am. I'm Evelyn Kensington, Emily's mother." "Of course." I straightened slightly and extended my hand. She took it with grace, but also something else, curiosity. "Caleb told us you might be here. I just wanted to say, thank you for coming." My guard went up instantly. "He told you I might come?" She nodded, her smile tightening. "He said there had been some distance, but he hoped this would be a step toward healing." I could have laughed, but I didn't. Instead, I said, "He's an optimist." She smiled again, more awkwardly this time. "Well, regardless, welcome. And if you need anything, please don't hesitate to ask." I watched her walk away, her heels digging slightly into the grass. So Caleb had told Emily's side of the family, but not mine. Interesting. The ceremony started like any other. Gentle music, guests shifting in their seats, the officiant clearing his throat. And then Emily appeared, glowing, perfect, exactly the image you'd expect. The collective breath of the crowd drew in and held. She walked down the aisle to soft applause. Caleb waited under the arch like a prince accepting his crown. And I watched it all from the back row, silent. The ceremony was short. Predictable vows. Nervous laughter. I-do-s exchanged like currency. Then came the announcement, the kiss, and the clapping. And just like that, they were married. The reception was where it all started to unravel. It was held in a massive glass-walled hall overlooking the vineyard. Chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls. Every table had a centerpiece of orchids and floating candles. Guests were directed to their seats via printed calligraphy cards. Mine didn't exist. I wandered casually to the table where my parents sat. Empty chair beside them. Name card. Reserved for family. I hovered. Mom's eyes landed on me. Oh, you made it, she said, sipping wine, not even standing. Apparently, I said. Dad didn't speak. He looked at me, his expression unreadable, then leaned back slightly like I was a question he didn't want to answer. I didn't see a seat card for me, I said calmly. Mom shrugged. Must have been a mistake. Maybe you're at one of the other tables. We didn't handle the seating arrangements. Sure you didn't. I glanced around. Tables were nearly full. Laughter rose from all directions. And then I spotted Caleb across the room, deep in conversation with Emily and two older gentlemen in tuxedos. He saw me. He didn't smile. Instead, he walked directly toward me. Hey, he said, dropping his voice low. Glad you could make it. No thanks to you, I replied. He exhaled. Listen, I didn't think you'd actually come. But you invited me. I asked Mom and Dad to invite you. That's different. My jaw clenched. I figured you'd see the invite, toss it, and move on. Like you always do, he said. I looked at him. Really looked at him. Tan, styled, confident. A man who'd never truly paid for anything in blood or silence. I came because I wanted to see if you remembered, I said quietly. Remember what? I didn't answer. I reached into my jacket and pulled out the photo. I held it up, letting it speak. His expression shifted, subtle, but real. Eyes darted to the photo, then to my face, then back. He swallowed. That was years ago. Yes, I said. And you never said a word. Never told them to turn back. Never checked if I made it home alive. He looked around, like someone might overhear. Isaac, it was one bad night. You were dramatic even then. I thought you were over it. Over it. Something inside me stilled. I'm not here to ruin your wedding, I said. You can relax. He gave a short, hollow laugh. Good. But I am staying until the speeches. He looked at me again, as if he wasn't sure whether I was bluffing. I wasn't. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It's surgical. And I had a toast prepared. One they'd never forget. The ballroom lights dimmed as waiters cleared the last of the dinner plates. Guests buzzed in a champagne haze, some leaning back with full stomachs, others dancing in polite little circles to a four-piece jazz band tucked in the corner. Caleb and Emily sat at a long head table, their names in gold script behind them. Everything sparkled, the wine glasses, the forks, even the people. A man in a powder blue suit clinked his glass. The room quieted. It's time for a few words from the people who know the bride and groom best. There was polite applause, and Emily's father stood to speak first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, a blend of wealth and warmth. He talked about Emily's childhood, her dreams, the first time she mentioned Caleb. He even cracked a joke about Caleb being so charming, we didn't even realize he was trying to marry up. Everyone laughed. Next came the best man, Caleb's college roommate, who kept things light and funny. Something about frat parties, Caleb's inability to cook, and how lucky he was to have found Emily. It was the kind of speech you expect, a little heart, a little humor, no sharp edges. Then the MC took the mic again and glanced down at a list. And finally, we have a special toast from Isaac. The room went quiet. All eyes shifted. My parents froze mid-sip. Caleb's jaw tightened. Emily blinked in confusion. And I stood up. I walked slowly to the mic, ignoring the awkward shifting around me. A few guests whispered. Some looked puzzled. Others simply stared, unsure of who I was or why I was speaking. I tapped the mic once. It rang through the room. Good evening, I said, voice steady. I'm Isaac, Caleb's younger brother. A few heads turned sharply now. The words landed like a ripple in still water. I could almost hear the murmurs begin to circulate. He has a brother? I wasn't sure I was going to come tonight, I continued. In fact, I spent the last few weeks thinking about whether I should. You see, I haven't spoken to my family in 18 years. Silence. Not the good kind. The kind that sucks the air out of the room. I got a wedding invitation out of nowhere. No call. No email. Just a card and a note that said, "It would mean a lot to the family if you came." I let the words sit. Then I pulled the photo from my pocket. This is me at 12 years old. I held it up between two fingers. Guests craned their necks to see. This was taken the morning after my parents left me at a gas station 80 miles from home. I had spilled a soda in the car, and instead of scolding me, they left. Told me to man up and figure it out. The crowd shifted. Uneasy glances. The sound of a wine glass being gently set down. They didn't come back. They didn't call. I slept behind a dumpster. The only reason I made it home was because a teacher picked me up the next day. I never got an apology. Not from my parents. Not from Caleb. And until this wedding invitation arrived, I thought they were all perfectly happy pretending I didn't exist. I looked at my parents. Dad's face was pale. Mom's mouth hung slightly open, as if she was trying to summon a response, but couldn't find one fast enough. Now, I'm not here to ruin anyone's evening, I said. Emily, you seem lovely. Your family has been kind and welcoming. And Caleb, well, you've always known how to put on a good face. That line hit hard. His expression cracked for just a moment. But I think weddings are about honesty, about truth. And it wouldn't be honest if I stood here tonight pretending that we were ever close, or that I grew up in a house where family meant protection, not survival. The room was stone silent now. People barely breathed. I was invited to this wedding to play a part in a picture-perfect day. A prop, really. A brother-shaped placeholder. I looked back at Caleb. So consider this my gift to you. I placed the photo on the head table right in front of him. A reminder of what family looks like when you turn your back on it. Then I turned, slowly, and walked away from the mic. No applause. Just stunned silence and a few audible gasps. And as I walked past my parents' table, I heard my mother hiss my name. Barely a whisper. My father started to rise, but I didn't stop. I didn't look back. I exited through the side of the hall and walked out into the cool night, the music now distant behind me. I wasn't angry. I wasn't shaking. I was free. But freedom is a strange thing. It doesn't always come with peace right away. Sometimes it just leaves a silence behind, the kind that makes you wonder what happens next. I had made my move, but the fallout, that was still coming. The drive back to the hotel was quiet. No jazz band, no clinking glasses, no performative laughter echoing off marble walls. Just the hum of tires against the gravel and the low whir of my thoughts catching up with me. I didn't go back to my room right away. Instead, I took a walk down one of the vineyard trails behind the hotel, winding between rows of dark grapevines under a moonlit sky. The tension in my chest had unraveled, thread by thread, with every step I took away from that wedding hall. I could still hear my mom's sharp gasp, see Caleb's carefully composed face fracture in real time, and feel the confused stares of strangers trying to connect that had been deliberately erased from the family photo. For most of my life, I believed I was the ghost in my own family. But tonight, I had reminded them I was flesh and blood and memory. And memory is a dangerous thing, especially when the people around you rely on forgetting. Back at the hotel, I found a voicemail waiting. From a number I didn't recognize. Isaac, it's Emily. Her voice was low, calm, but brittle. I don't know what I expected, but I didn't expect that. I wish someone had told me. I just wanted you to know I'm not mad you said what you did. You deserve to. And I'm sorry. She hung up without giving me a number to call back. That was the first apology I'd received in 18 years. And it wasn't even from my family. I left early the next morning. No breakfast. No drawn-out goodbyes. Just a short email to the front desk asking them to cancel the rest of my reservation and send me the final bill. I didn't feel like waiting around to see the aftermath. I knew my parents. I knew Caleb. They'd either pretend it never happened or scramble to spin it into a misunderstanding. Maybe both. But I also knew the photo was still sitting on the head table when I left. I kept the suit, tossed the tie, went home. And once I was home, really home, in my small apartment where Max greeted me with excited barks and a wagging tail, something strange happened. People started reaching out. First, it was my cousin Hannah. She messaged me on LinkedIn, said she'd heard about the speech from someone at the wedding and wanted to apologize for never asking where I went after I disappeared. Said she always thought it was weird how no one ever mentioned me again, but assumed it was her place not to ask. We talked for a while. She asked if she could visit. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no. Then came a message from Mrs. Valencia. She still remembered, still had the photo she'd taken. I always wondered what happened to you, she wrote. I'm so proud of you, Isaac. I hadn't cried in years, but I did that night. It wasn't loud. Just a quiet, aching kind of release. The kind you feel after holding your breath for too long and finally exhaling. I started sleeping better, waking up earlier. I found a new rhythm. My job felt easier. My code cleaner. I took Max on longer walks. Started writing again. Short stories, essays, anything to pour the storm in my head into something that made sense. A week later, I got an email from a woman who worked at a nonprofit for estranged adults, children who had been cut off, disowned, or abandoned. She'd heard about the wedding speech through a friend of a friend who worked the event and thought it was the most quietly powerful thing she'd ever heard. She asked if I'd be willing to speak at one of their private retreats. Not as a motivational speaker, just as someone who lived it. I said yes. That one event turned into 2, then 4. Then an invitation to sit on a panel at a university symposium about family estrangement and trauma recovery. I didn't wear the suit to those, just a simple shirt, jeans, sometimes a blazer if I wanted to look a little more polished. But I always carried the photo. I'd show it when I spoke. Tell the story exactly as it happened. No embellishment, just truth. And every time, someone came up to me afterward and said, "That happened to me too." I wasn't alone. I never had been. My voice, the same one they used to call too soft, too sensitive, too quiet, had finally found its volume. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was power. And with every person I helped, every story I heard, every hand I shook, I felt it grow. Not the anger, but the clarity. The certainty. Because while Caleb went back to his new wife and polished reputation, he didn't realize the ripple I'd started, or the fact that I wasn't finished. Because soon, someone else from their side would come looking, and they'd want answers. It started with an email. From Emily. Again. But this time, it wasn't short, or polite, or carefully composed. This one was raw. "Isaac, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me. Did your parents really leave you? Like that? At 12? I asked Caleb. He didn't deny it. He just said, "It's complicated." But you didn't sound complicated when you told that story. You sounded clear, like someone who's been carrying something heavy for a long time. If it's true, I need to know more. Please. I stared at the message for a long time. Emily had every reason to shut the door and move on. She could have ignored me, spun it in her head as family drama, written me off as bitter or unstable. But she didn't. She asked for truth, and I wasn't going to waste that. So I replied. I told her everything. No dramatics, no exaggeration, just the sequence of facts. I told her about the gas station, the silence when I returned, how I put myself through school, the way my name was never mentioned again, how they'd rewritten the family photo like I was a smudge they could crop out. I didn't blame her. I didn't ask her to pick sides. I just gave her the truth and let it sit. She replied the next day, "I believe you. And I need time to process this. They never told me. Caleb said he was an only child until we got engaged. They erased you. And now I'm wondering what else they've rewritten. Would you ever be willing to meet for coffee? Just the two of us." It was like watching a crack form in a window that had always been spotless. I knew better than to push. I said yes, but I let her set the time and place. We met a week later, in a quiet cafe, 2 towns away from her and Caleb's home. She wore no makeup, no pearls, none of the bridal polish. Just a hoodie and jeans, hair pulled back, eyes swollen like she hadn't slept. When she sat down, she didn't even say hello. She just asked, what else did they do? So I told her, not everything. Not the little humiliations, the 1,000 small cuts that never bled enough for anyone else to notice, but the big ones. Like when my mom forgot my birthday 2 years in a row and then blamed me for not reminding her. Or when dad refused to co-sign a small student loan, saying, "You'll just waste it," while handing Caleb $5,000 for a trip to Cancun. Emily's hands stayed wrapped around her mug the entire time. She asked questions, took mental notes. She didn't try to defend them, just listened. And finally, she said, "They called you a ghost. At the wedding. That's how Caleb explained you. Said you vanished when you were a teen. Said you always had a flair for the dramatic." I blinked. They used the word ghost? She nodded. I couldn't help but laugh. Not because it was funny, but because it was so absurdly perfect. "They didn't lose a son," I said. "They buried one." Emily went quiet, then leaned in, her voice low. "You know what scares me most?" I waited. She whispered, "What if they do that to our kids someday?" And there it was. The shift. The doubt had taken root. And Caleb didn't know. Emily stood before she could say anything more. She said she needed time, said she was grateful, said she wasn't ready to talk to him just yet. But she'd be in touch. That was 3 days before I got a letter in the mail. No return address again, just like before. But this time, the handwriting wasn't my mom's. It was my father's. And inside, a note scrawled in rigid, uneven letters. Isaac, I don't know what you think you're doing. This isn't helping anyone. You're bringing shame on the family. Let it go. If you keep stirring things up, there will be consequences. We gave you a second chance to be included. Don't make us regret it. Dad. There it was. No apology. No regret. Just threat disguised as dignity. I sat with the note for a moment. Then I placed it next to the photo of 12-year-old me. Two artifacts of the same legacy. And I smiled. Because now I had what I needed. Proof. Words, written by his own hand, revealing exactly who he was and still is. I scanned the letter, saved it to a secure folder, and backed it up to 2 cloud drives. Then I picked up my phone. I called a journalist, someone I'd met at one of the trauma panels. She'd told me once, if you ever decide to share your story, I'll help you do it right. She answered on the first ring. I'm ready, I said, but I don't want to just talk. I want to show them. She paused, then said, how far are you willing to go? I looked down at the note, at the photo, at the name on the return invite that tried to erase me. All the way, I said. The article was published under the title, Left Behind, One Man's Quiet Escape from a Family That Tried to Erase Him. It went live on a Tuesday morning. By noon, it had already been shared thousands of times. The journalist I worked with, Claire Russo, had done her research. She verified every detail. She interviewed Mrs. Valencia, confirmed the gas station incident, even tracked down my old landlord who vouched that I'd put myself through school without family support. The story included the photo of me at 12, standing near the dumpster with a torn backpack and cracked sneakers. It included quotes from my speech at the wedding. It included the letter from my father, blurred only slightly to preserve privacy, and Emily's permission to mention that she had reached out to me afterward. Claire was careful, precise. Not a tabloid piece, not a scandal-bait hit job. Just truth, told clean and unfiltered. And that's why it exploded. Because it wasn't loud. It was honest. Comments poured in. People saying it reminded them of their own estrangement, their own moments of being dismissed or replaced or silenced. Others praised the restraint I'd shown at the wedding. A few guessed which vineyard it had been, though I never confirmed it. But what mattered more were the private messages I received. Dozens of them. From people who'd been disowned, forgotten, labeled problem children by families who refused to take accountability. But the best one? That came from a Kensington, Emily's older brother. His name was Mark, and he didn't mince words. I always thought Caleb was fake. Too polished, too rehearsed. Now I know why. I'm sorry they did that to you. My parents are furious, not at you, but at Caleb. They feel like they were lied to. Used. They're meeting with Emily today. Thought you'd want to know. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Because just 2 days later, another email arrived. From Emily. Isaac. I read the article. I saw the comments. I showed Caleb. He exploded. Said you ambushed him. Said you made it all sound worse than it was. But you didn't. You didn't even share everything. And that's what made me realize you're telling the truth. He asked me to choose. I chose. I'm staying at my parents' place for now. The marriage is being annulled. I'm sorry it had to happen like this. But thank you for not letting me step into that lie with blinders on. Emily. I read the message 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and sat in silence for a long while. Because I wasn't celebrating. I wasn't gloating. I was remembering. I was remembering the day I stood in our hallway at 12 years old, holding a gas station candy bar in my hand, thinking they have to come back. They have to. And now, nearly 2 decades later, the family that left me behind had finally tasted what it meant to lose control of the story. It wasn't over. Because 3 days after the article dropped, my parents called. I don't know how they got my number. Maybe through an old contact, or maybe they finally started paying attention to the places I'd spoken at. But when I saw unknown number, I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened. It was my mom. Her voice was trembling, not with sadness, but fury. Isaac, how dare you? We invited you. We tried to be civil. And you humiliated us. You've ruined Caleb's life. Emily's parents are threatening legal action over the gifts, the deposits, the reputation. You think this is justice? It's cruelty. Vindictive, petty cruelty. I hope you're happy. I hope you're proud of yourself. Then my dad got on the line. His voice wasn't angry. It was quiet. Almost defeated. You always were too soft. I should have known you'd grow into the kind of man who'd twist a moment into a weapon. Congratulations. You've destroyed your family. Don't ever call us again. Then he hung up. I stared at the wall for a while, wondering if the words would sting. if they'd echo like they used to. But they didn't. Because I didn't destroy my family. They destroyed the version of me that still needed them. And that was the difference. I stood up, walked to my desk, pulled open the drawer, and took out the photo one last time. The 12-year-old boy who had no idea what he would grow into. I smiled at him. Then I put the photo away. Not because I was burying the past, but because I'd finally finished writing the ending. The fallout didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments. First, it was whispers, mutual acquaintances from my hometown reaching out, people I hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Some messaged me privately with shock, others with guilt. I had no idea. I thought you moved for college. Your parents always said you were difficult. Then came the social media shifts. My parents, who'd spent years curating their image online, suddenly went dark. Family photos began disappearing from their pages. The proud parents of Caleb and Emily banner vanished. And the most telling sign? Caleb's entire wedding album was deleted overnight. No explanation. Just gone. I found out later through a quiet LinkedIn update that Caleb had taken a leave of absence from his company. Personal matters, the blurb read. But I knew better. Emily had followed through with the annulment. She moved in temporarily with her brother and eventually returned to her studies. She sent me a short message weeks later. I'm rebuilding. It's messy, but it's mine. Thank you again. I hope you're doing okay. I was. Better than okay, actually. The nonprofit invited me to become a regular contributor. I began working with them part-time, helping organize outreach for other estranged young adults. I started writing, not just articles, but a book. The working title? Ghost Son, What Happens When They Pretend You Never Existed. I didn't write it for revenge. I wrote it for the kid I used to be. For the kids still out there, quietly packing a bag they'll never unpack because they're afraid even their footsteps are too loud. One day, I received a letter. Not from my parents. Not from Caleb. From Mrs. Valencia. Still written in her loopy, generous cursive. Dear Isaac, I clipped out your article and read it twice. Then I put it on the wall of my classroom, right above the desk where I keep extra snacks for students who never bring lunch. I tell them about you sometimes, not by name, but your story. That sometimes, being kind isn't just about helping someone up. It's about remembering them when everyone else forgets. I'm so proud of you. Love. Mrs. V. That one made me cry. Not the silent tears I was used to. Real ones. The kind that cracked something open inside. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was proving anything anymore. I wasn't a shadow. I wasn't the forgotten. I was here. I had survived. And now, I was living. So when people ask me how it felt, standing in front of my family and showing them the truth, I just smile. Because the truth? The best revenge isn't watching them crumble. It's watching yourself rise, in full daylight, while they're still trying to rewrite the dark. And I've never looked back. I'm Owen, and I turned 18 a few months ago, or at least, I was supposed to. My parents didn't really let that happen. The day that was supposed to mark my freedom ended up being the night everything changed between me, my brother, and the people who raised us. I grew up in a house where everything revolved around my older brother, Caleb. He was 2 years older, the gifted one, the golden boy, the future doctor. At least, that's how my mom always described him to anyone who'd listen. Every time a family friend came over, she'd find a way to mention his grades or how he sacrificed his weekends to volunteer at the hospital, which, by the way, he did exactly once. My dad wasn't much better. He'd beam with pride every time Caleb so much as existed. Meanwhile, I was the quiet kid who liked to draw, read, and keep to myself. If Caleb got an A, we'd go out to dinner. If I got an A, I'd get told, "Good job, buddy," before the conversation moved back to him. I didn't resent it at first. I told myself that's just how families work. Some kids are more outgoing, more charismatic, more seen. But as I got older, the difference became impossible to ignore. When I was 16, I saved up for months to buy a used guitar. I wanted to learn music seriously, maybe even study it one day. I remember showing my mom the instrument with this huge smile, waiting for her to say something nice. She looked at it, frowned, and said, "That's nice, but you should really focus on something practical, like your brother." That sentence haunted me for years. Like your brother. It was their favorite comparison. Caleb was the sun in our house, and I was the shadow that proved his light existed. Still, I try not to take it personally. I worked after school at a small grocery store, put aside every cent, and did my best to stay out of trouble. I told myself that when I turned 18, I'd finally be treated like an adult. I even planned a small birthday dinner. Nothing fancy, just a few friends at my favorite diner. But 2 days before my birthday, Mom sat me down in the living room with that look she always used before bad news. Caleb was sprawled across the couch, scrolling on his phone. "Owen," she started, "we've been thinking maybe it's best if you don't do a big celebration this year." I blinked. "A big celebration? Mom, it's just dinner with friends. I'm paying for it myself." She sighed like I was being unreasonable. "It's not about the money. It's just your brother's been feeling down lately. He didn't get into his first choice med school, and we don't want to make him feel worse by, well, making a big deal about your birthday right now." I actually laughed, thinking she was joking. "You're kidding, right? You're canceling my 18th birthday because Caleb didn't get into college." Dad chimed in from behind his newspaper. "Watch your tone, son. Your brother's going through a hard time. You can celebrate later." I stared at them, trying to process what I was hearing. Celebrate later, as if turning 18 was something you could just postpone until it was convenient for someone else. Caleb didn't say a word. He just smirked at his phone, pretending not to listen. That night, I lay awake replaying every little moment where I'd been pushed aside for him. Every birthday where he got the bigger gift. Every Christmas where I unwrapped socks while he got a new laptop for studying. And now, even my 18th birthday wasn't mine to have. I tried reasoning with them again the next morning. "I've already told my friends. I paid for the reservation. It's not fair to cancel now." Mom's voice sharpened. "Life isn't always fair, Owen. You should be more understanding. Caleb's your brother. Don't you care about how he feels?" That last question hit me hard. Because I did care. I always had. But it was never returned. Caleb never once skipped a celebration for me. He never once toned down his own happiness for my sake. I guess the rules only went one way. I skipped breakfast and went for a walk to clear my head. It was late February, cold and gray, and I remember thinking how fitting that was. My almost birthday day looked like it was mourning something. When I came back, Mom was on the phone with Aunt Linda, saying how mature I was for agreeing to cancel the celebration. Caleb was sitting in the kitchen eating pancakes, and he looked up at me with this smug little grin. "Guess I'm still the favorite," he said, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. I didn't reply. I just turned around and went to my room. That's when something in me shifted. I realized I couldn't keep waiting for them to value me. They weren't going to wake up one day and suddenly see me for who I was. So I started planning. Not for revenge, not yet, but for freedom. I went through my drawers, packed the essentials, and tucked the rest of my savings into my backpack. I didn't have much, about $1,200, but it was enough for a few weeks if I was careful. I spent the next day pretending everything was normal. I smiled at dinner, laughed at Caleb's stupid jokes, and waited. Then, when the clock hit midnight, technically my birthday, I quietly walked out of the house with my bag slung over my shoulder. The cold air hit me like a slap, but it felt good. Real. I remember standing at the end of the driveway, looking back at that house, and thinking, this is the last time they'll ever take something from me. I found a cheap room to rent near the community college and started working extra shifts at the grocery store. It wasn't glamorous, but for the first time, I was free. No guilt trips, no comparisons, no Caleb. Weeks turned into months, and little by little, I built my own life. I saved enough to move into a small apartment, started taking online classes, and kept teaching myself guitar. Every milestone I hit, I thought about how they would have found a way to ruin it, and I was grateful they couldn't anymore. Then, about a year later, everything came crashing back. It started with a text from my mom. "Can we talk?" I ignored it. Then came another one from Dad. "Your brother's been having a tough time. Maybe you could help him out, since you're doing so well now." That caught my attention. Doing so well? How did they even know? I hadn't told them anything. Turns out, Caleb had found my Instagram. He saw the photos of my apartment, my guitar, the small but growing YouTube channel I'd started for my music. He saw the comments from people supporting me. And for someone who'd always been the golden boy, seeing his lesser brother thrive without him must have been unbearable. Because the next thing I knew, he showed up at my door. And that's where everything really started to unravel. I'll never forget the sound of that knock. 3 short, impatient raps, the kind that didn't ask permission, they just announced, "I'm coming in whether you like it or not." When I opened the door, Caleb was standing there with his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, chin tilted slightly upward, wearing that same smirk he always used when he wanted to look superior. He didn't say hi. He just looked past me into my apartment like he was inspecting it. "So," he said finally, "this is where you've been hiding." Hiding. That's what he called it. Not living, not moving out, not starting over. Hiding. I didn't answer right away. My first instinct was to shut the door, but curiosity, and maybe a trace of old brotherly instinct, made me step aside. "You want to come in?" I asked, my voice flat. He shrugged. "Sure." The moment he walked in, I regretted it. His eyes scanned the place like he was looking for proof that I didn't belong there. The cheap secondhand furniture, the stack of dishes drying on the counter, my guitar propped up by the window. "Not bad," he said eventually, running a finger over my table. "Kinda small, though." "It's mine," I said. He chuckled, like I'd said something funny. "Right? Independent Owen, huh? I told Mom you'd run back after a month." I ignored that and asked, "Why are you here, Caleb?" He finally dropped the fake grin. "Mom and Dad are worried about you. You just left." "No note, nothing." You know how selfish that was. That word, selfish, made my blood boil. Selfish? You mean like being told I couldn't celebrate my own birthday because you were sad about your college rejection? He frowned, clearly not expecting me to push back. "It wasn't like that." "Oh, it was exactly like that," I said. "You sat there eating pancakes while they canceled my birthday dinner for you. You didn't even try to stop them." He looked at me for a second, then shrugged. "It's not my fault they care about me more. You can't blame me for being the favorite." I don't know what I expected, maybe some guilt, or at least some awareness. But hearing him say it so casually felt like someone pressing a thumb into an old bruise. "So that's it," I said quietly. "You came here just to remind me you're still their golden boy?" He grinned again. "You sound jealous." That's when I realized nothing had changed. He wasn't there to apologize. He was there because he'd seen me doing well, and it bothered him. I walked to the door and opened it. "You should go." For a moment, I thought he would argue, but instead he smiled that infuriating smile and said, "Fine. But don't be surprised if Mom calls soon. She misses you." After he left, I just stood there, staring at the closed door. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger. I tried to shake it off, telling myself he'd disappear again. But a week later, my mom showed up. I came home from work and saw her car parked outside the building. She was leaning against it, clutching a paper bag. "Owen," she called when she saw me. "Finally." I sighed. "Mom, how did you even find where I live?" "Caleb told me." She said like it was nothing. "Don't be mad. We just wanted to see you." I didn't have the energy to argue, so I let her in. She looked around the apartment, much like Caleb had, but instead of mocking it, she just sighed dramatically. "You shouldn't be living like this. This place is so plain. It's what I can afford." She set the paper bag on my counter. "I brought you some food. You're probably not eating properly." Inside were containers of leftovers, Caleb's favorites. Mom's famous lasagna, chicken parmesan, even that chocolate pie she always made for him on his birthdays. "You know I don't even like most of this," I said softly. She looked genuinely confused. "Really? I thought everyone loved my lasagna." Of course she did. She never noticed the details about me. We sat at the table, and she started talking about how things had been so hard since I left. How my dad was stressed, and Caleb was trying his best after his second college rejection. Every sentence started with how someone else was feeling. Not once did she ask how I was doing. When she finally did, it was in the form of a backhanded compliment. "You seem happy. I didn't think you'd last this long out here. You were always so sensitive." I bit back the urge to laugh. "You mean, I didn't let you walk all over me?" She frowned. "Don't start, Owen. We're trying to fix things." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But then she said the thing that made me realize fixing things meant something very different to her than to me. "Your brother might move in with you for a while," she said casually. "Just until he gets back on his feet." I froze. "What? He needs a fresh start. You've clearly managed to do that for yourself." "I thought maybe you could help him," set an example. I stood up. "You can't be serious." She blinked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. "Owen, he's your brother. Families help each other." I laughed, an ugly, bitter laugh that surprised even me. "You mean, I help him while you pretend it's fair? You never helped me when I needed it." Her tone turned sharp. "Don't talk to me like that. We gave you everything." I looked around my tiny apartment, the place I'd built from nothing, and said, "No, Mom. I gave me everything. You gave Caleb everything else." She stood there, speechless for once. Then she picked up her purse, muttered something about me being ungrateful, and walked out. For the next few weeks, things went quiet. I focused on work, classes, and music. My YouTube channel started gaining traction, not huge numbers, but enough that I could see a future forming. Then, out of nowhere, Dad called. I hadn't spoken to him since I left. "Owen," he said, his voice measured, "your mother's worried sick. You shouldn't have spoken to her that way." "Dad?" I said tiredly. "She wanted me to let Caleb move in." "Well, he needs a place," Dad said, as if that explained everything. "He's family." "So am I," said quietly. But that never seemed to matter. He sighed. "You're being dramatic. We've always loved you." I almost laughed. "Yeah, maybe in theory." There was a long pause before he said, "If you don't want to help, fine. But don't expect us to support you when things go south." That was the last straw. "You haven't supported me in years," I said, and hung up. For the first time, I felt something shift inside me. Not just anger or hurt, but clarity. I realized that I didn't owe them anything. But the universe wasn't done testing that realization. A few days later, Caleb showed up again. This time, he wasn't alone. He had a suitcase. "Don't freak out," he said, setting it down by the door. "Mom said you'd let me crash here." I just stared at him. "No, absolutely not." "Come on, man," he said, running a hand through his hair. "It's just for a couple weeks. My roommate kicked me out, and you've got the space." "I have one bedroom," I said. "And you can afford rent. You've got a job." He hesitated. "Yeah, about that. I quit." Of course he did. Caleb never stayed anywhere long enough to face consequences. I crossed my arms. "You're not staying here, Caleb." He rolled his eyes. "Wow, you really think you're better than everyone now, huh? Big man with a YouTube channel and a crappy apartment." "Get out," I said. He didn't move. "You know, Mom's right. You've changed. You used to be nice." I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "You used to be tolerable." That got his attention. His eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I saw a real anger flash there. "You're gonna regret this." And then he left, but not before snapping a photo of my apartment as he walked out. I didn't know what he planned to do with it, but I found out soon enough. A few days later, I got a message from my aunt. "Are you okay? Your mom said you're struggling and refusing help. Don't be too proud, dear." It didn't take long to piece it together. Caleb must have shown my parents that picture, claiming I was barely scraping by. They probably told the whole family I was too stubborn to come home. The pity calls started trickling in. The texts. The passive-aggressive "we're praying for you" messages. It was humiliating. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I doubled down on my work. I uploaded more music, grew my audience, and even got a small sponsorship deal. The better I did, the more desperate they seemed to get. Then, one evening, as I was finishing a recording session, I got another knock at my door. This time, it wasn't Caleb. It was all three of them: Mom, Dad, and the golden boy himself. They stood there like a united front, each with a different expression. Mom looked anxious, Dad looked stern, and Caleb looked smug. "Can we come in?" Mom asked. I hesitated, then stepped aside. The moment they sat down, I knew it wasn't a social visit. There was tension in the air, the kind that only comes before a storm. Dad spoke first. "We need to talk about this attitude of yours." "What attitude?" I asked. Mom jumped in. "You've been distant, disrespectful. We've tried to help you, but you keep pushing us away." I almost laughed again. "Help me? You canceled my 18th birthday because Caleb didn't feel special enough. You tried to move him into my apartment. And now you're saying I'm the problem." Caleb crossed his arms, leaning back in the chair. "You really love playing the victim, huh?" That was it. Something inside me snapped. I looked at each of them, the people who'd made me feel invisible my entire life. And for the first time, I wasn't scared to speak. "You know what?" I said quietly. "Maybe I am done being the quiet one." And just as I was about to tell them everything I'd held back for years, all the resentment, all the pain, Caleb smirked, leaned forward, and said something that changed everything. Caleb's smirk said everything before the words even left his mouth. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, that fake casual confidence dripping off him like oil. "You think you've got it all figured out, don't you, Owen?" he said. "Your little apartment, your YouTube channel, your independence. You really think that makes you better than us?" I didn't answer. I was still trying to understand why they were all here, sitting in my tiny living room like it was an intervention, except no one looked concerned about me. They looked angry. Threatened. Mom clasped her hands together and took a shaky breath. We didn't come here to fight, sweetheart. We need to be honest about something. My gut tightened. What's that supposed to mean? Dad's jaw flexed like he was forcing himself to stay calm. Your mother and I were talking, and we think it's time you come home. I blinked. What? Mom nodded. This whole living on your own thing was fine for a while. But it's gone too far. You're isolating yourself. You're being prideful. Caleb needs support, and we need our family back together. There it was again, Caleb needs. It was always about what he needed. I tried to laugh it off, but my chest felt tight. You're joking, right? You can't just decide I move back in. Dad frowned. We're not deciding. We're asking. But you're making this harder than it needs to be. We just think it's best for everyone. For everyone except me, I muttered. Mom's voice softened, almost pleading. Owen, honey, your brother's been through so much. He didn't get into med school again, and he's been depressed. You know how fragile he can be. So what? I'm supposed to move back home to cheer him up? Dad's tone hardened. Don't talk about your brother that way. You wouldn't even have that apartment if it weren't for us. I froze. What's that supposed to mean? He glanced at Mom, then back at me. We helped you get started, whether you realize it or not. That money in your account when you moved out, it came from us. My head snapped up. What? No, it didn't. That was from my job at the grocery store. I saved every. Mom interrupted, her voice trembling with fake sadness. We transferred some money into your savings when you were 17. We wanted to give you a safety net. But that money is still ours, technically. The room went silent. I could hear the faint hum of the fridge, the distant cars outside, and the slow, dawning realization that this wasn't about family or concern. It was about control. I stood up. So, what? You think that gives you the right to tell me how to live my life? Dad's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't even have this place without that money. We deserve some respect. Caleb chuckled under his breath. Sounds like someone owes the family a little gratitude. I turned to him, anger boiling up. Gratitude? You mean the guy who never lifted a finger in his life wants me to be grateful? He shrugged. You wouldn't last a week if they cut you off. I wanted to yell, to scream. But something about the smug look on his face told me that's exactly what he wanted, for me to lose control so they could play the victims again. So instead, I took a deep breath and said quietly, Get out. Mom's voice cracked. Owen, get out. Dad stood up, glaring. We're trying to help you. Don't make us regret it. I didn't move. You already should. They left eventually, slamming the door behind them. But that wasn't the end of it. Not even close. A few days passed. I tried to move on, focusing on my music, recording late into the night. But there was a tension I couldn't shake, the feeling that something was brewing behind the scenes. And then it happened. I woke up one morning to a flood of notifications on my phone. Comments, messages, mentions. My YouTube channel, the one I'd spent a year building, was blowing up. At first, I thought it was a good thing. Maybe one of my songs had finally gone viral. Then I saw the title of a new video spreading like wildfire. The truth about Owen, the liar behind the music. My stomach dropped. It was a 15-minute video, uploaded by some random account that had only been created the day before. But the voice? I recognized it immediately. Caleb. He'd used a fake name, distorted his voice slightly, but there was no mistaking the way he spoke. The same smug pauses. The same little inflections. The video showed screenshots of my Instagram, my YouTube analytics, even clips from my live streams. He claimed I was faking my success, that I'd stolen money from my parents, that I was playing the victim to make them look bad. He even implied that my followers were being scammed by a kid pretending to be broke. It was like watching someone burn down your house and narrate it like a bedtime story. At one point, he said, Funny how Owen acts like a self-made man when all his bills were paid by mommy and daddy. Guess being the family disappointment finally paid off. I felt sick. I tried to report the video, but it had already been shared on Reddit and Facebook. My DMs were full of people asking if it was true, others mocking me, some even calling me a fraud. I called my parents immediately. Mom picked up on the third ring. Did you know about this? I demanded. She hesitated. Owen, calm down. You knew? My voice shook. You knew, didn't you? She sighed. Your brother was just trying to tell his side of the story. People deserve to know what really happened. What really happened? I shouted. You mean your version? Where I'm the villain for wanting a normal birthday. Dad's voice joined in from the background. You brought this on yourself, Owen. You cut us off. You left us no choice. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You let him do this? You let him drag my name online. Mom said softly, you should have just come home. I hung up before I said something I couldn't take back. That night, I sat in my dark apartment, staring at the glow of my laptop screen. The video had hit 20,000 views. The comments section was a battlefield, half the people defending me, the other half tearing me apart. And then I saw a comment from Caleb's personal account. Guess success runs in the family. Some of us just earn it honestly. I slammed the laptop shut so hard the sound echoed through the apartment. For the first time in my life, I didn't just feel angry. I felt betrayed. Utterly, deeply betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect me. They didn't just ruin my birthday, or my childhood, or my peace of mind. They were actively trying to destroy everything I'd built. I barely slept that night. My thoughts kept spinning. Flashes of Caleb's smirk, my mom's voice, my dad's threats. I thought about all the times I'd excused their behavior, all the times I'd told myself they'd change. But now, I saw it for what it was. They didn't want me back because they loved me. They wanted me back because they couldn't stand the idea that I was doing better without them. The next morning, I got another text from Caleb. Caleb, hey, bro, sorry about the video. I'll take it down if you apologize to Mom. I stared at the message for a long time, feeling that mix of disbelief and numb fury. Me, you posted lies about me online. Caleb, not lies, just perspective. Me, you humiliated me to thousands of people. Caleb, then fix it. Say sorry. Come home. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Instead, I turned my phone off and sat in silence. For hours. And that's when I realized something I probably should have seen long ago. They would never stop taking from me. Not until I made them see what they'd done. Not until I took something back. But before I could plan anything, things got worse. Much worse. Because 2 days later, I came home from work and found my apartment door slightly open. The lock was scratched, and the inside looked wrong. Drawers pulled out. Papers scattered. My guitar case, empty. Someone had broken in, and I didn't even need to guess who it was. When I first saw the mess, I didn't even move. I just stood there in the doorway, staring at my small apartment, my safe little bubble, torn apart. It didn't look real. The drawers were emptied onto the floor, my books scattered like someone had stomped through them, and the one thing that made this place feel like mine, my guitar, was gone. For a second, I told myself it had to be a coincidence. Maybe someone random had broken in. Maybe I'd been unlucky. But then I saw it. On the kitchen counter, right beside the pile of my open mail, was a small photo. It was a picture of me and Caleb when we were kids, the one that used to sit on my dresser back home. We were maybe 10 and 12, both in matching sweaters, forced smiles plastered on our faces. I hadn't seen that photo in years. And now it was sitting here, like a calling card. My hands started shaking. I grabbed my phone and dialed the police, my voice trembling as I explained what had happened. They came, took notes, looked around, and basically told me what I already knew. Without security footage or witnesses, there wasn't much they could do. They wrote a report, told me to make a list of everything missing, and left. The moment the door closed behind them, the silence felt heavier than before. I sank onto the couch, surrounded by the wreckage, and just sat there staring at the empty spot where my guitar used to be. It wasn't just an instrument. It was the one thing I'd bought entirely on my own. My first real proof that I could make something of myself. And now it was gone. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every sound made me flinch. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, everything felt like a threat. I stayed up until sunrise, scrolling through my phone, rereading old messages from my mom and Caleb, trying to piece together how I'd gotten here. The next morning, I went through my drawers again, this time more carefully. I found something I hadn't noticed before, an envelope tucked behind a stack of receipts. Inside was a folded note, written in my brother's unmistakable handwriting. You should have stayed humble, little bro. Maybe this will teach you. No signature. No explanation. Just that. My hands clenched so tight the paper crumpled. I could feel the anger rising in me. Hot, suffocating, and useless. Because what could I do? Call the police again and tell them my brother probably did it? They'd just shrug and say it was a family matter. So instead, I did nothing. I cleaned up the mess, threw the note in a drawer, and forced myself to keep moving. I went to work that day like a zombie. My boss, a kind older guy named Rick, noticed immediately. You all right, kid? he asked while restocking shelves. Yeah, I lied. Just tired. He didn't push. He just nodded and said, "You're one of the good ones. Don't let people wear you down." It was such a simple thing to say, but for some reason, it stuck with me. I needed to hear that I wasn't crazy for feeling the way I did. Over the next few days, I stayed quiet. I didn't call my parents. I didn't text Caleb. I just worked, ate, and slept. The world outside my apartment kept spinning, but mine had shrunk into something small and silent. My YouTube channel took a hit. I lost subscribers, brands stopped replying, and a few of my fans sent messages saying they were disappointed after seeing that video Caleb made. I tried posting a short update explaining that it was all lies, but that only made things worse. The trolls came in full force, accusing me of lying, saying I was playing victim again. It was like screaming into a void that just echoed back laughter. One evening, after another long shift at the grocery store, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee gone cold. The sky was gray, the city humming below me, and for the first time, I felt completely alone. No family, no reputation, no guitar, nothing that made me feel like me. That's when the thought hit me. Maybe this was my rock bottom. And weirdly enough, that gave me clarity. Because if this was the lowest point, then the only direction left to go was up. So I started making small changes. I didn't announce them, didn't tell anyone. I just began rebuilding quietly. The first thing I did was close my old social media accounts. Every single one. I created a new YouTube channel under a pseudonym and began uploading again, using what I had left, my backup guitar, an old mic, and a cheap laptop. I didn't care about followers anymore. I just needed to create. It felt good, almost therapeutic, like I was taking back pieces of myself they couldn't touch. Then I picked up a second job at a local cafe. The owner, a woman named Claire, hired me without much fuss. She liked my work ethic, and soon I was pulling morning shifts there and evenings at the store. It was exhausting, but it kept me focused. A few weeks passed, and I started to notice something strange: silence. No calls, no texts, no new chaos. It was like my family had finally decided I wasn't worth the trouble anymore. But silence didn't mean peace. It meant they were planning something. I could feel it. One night, after closing the cafe, I came home to find a letter taped to my door. No envelope this time. Just a sheet of paper, folded once. "We want to make things right. Family meeting tomorrow. 6 p.m. Don't ignore us again." No signature, but I didn't need one. The handwriting was my dad's. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. What did make things right even mean in their world? Usually, it meant pretending nothing happened while I apologized for everything. Still, a part of me, the naive part that still hoped for something good, considered showing up. Maybe they'd realized how wrong they'd been. Maybe Caleb had confessed. Maybe they were ready to be a real family. By 6 p.m. the next day, I was pacing my living room, torn between curiosity and self-preservation. In the end, I didn't go. I knew how that meeting would end, with me being guilt-tripped into forgiving them while Caleb sat there smirking. So I stayed home. And an hour later, my phone buzzed. "Mom, we waited for you. This was your last chance to fix things." "Dad, don't bother calling again. We're done." That was it. Years of loyalty, of begging for approval, of trying to prove I was enough, all erased in 2 messages. For the first time, though, I didn't cry. I just felt empty, then calm, because I realized something powerful in that moment. I didn't need them anymore. But fate, or maybe irony, wasn't ready to let me rest. A few days later, I got an email from a company, the one that had sponsored my music channel before everything went downhill. They'd seen the drama online and decided to cut ties. My small source of income was gone. It hurt, sure, but part of me had expected it. The damage Caleb caused wasn't going to vanish overnight. I spent the next few weeks scraping by. Rent, food, work, repeat. I barely had time to think, and maybe that was a blessing. But every once in a while, I'd look at that empty corner where my guitar used to sit and feel that ache again. Then one evening, as I was closing up the cafe, Claire came out from the back with a letter in her hand. "Someone dropped this off for you," she said. I frowned. "For me?" She nodded. "Guy said he was your brother." My stomach dropped. I took the envelope and stepped outside into the cool night air before opening it. Inside was a single note and a photo. The note read, "You didn't show up." So I showed them the truth. The photo was of me, sitting in my apartment, unaware, taken through my window. I felt the blood drain from my face. That was when it hit me. Caleb hadn't just broken in once. He'd been watching me. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. I stayed at the cafe until dawn, drinking stale coffee, staring at that photo, and trying to think. My brother wasn't just cruel. He was obsessed. He wanted me to break completely. But sitting there, surrounded by the hum of the espresso machines and the faint city lights outside, something inside me hardened. He wanted me to feel powerless. He wanted me scared. And for the first time in my life, I decided I wasn't going to give him that satisfaction. If this was rock bottom, if they'd truly taken everything from me, then it was time to stop playing defense. Because I might have been the quiet one all those years. But I wasn't stupid. And if Caleb thought he could destroy me and walk away untouched, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. When you hit rock bottom, there's something strangely liberating about it. You stop worrying about what people think of you because, honestly, there's nothing left to lose. That's where I was, sitting in the corner booth of the cafe at sunrise, watching people pass by with their morning coffees, realizing that for the first time in years, I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Not my parents. Not Caleb. No one. I went home later that morning, cautious and alert. My stomach twisted as I unlocked the door, half expecting another mess, another note, another photo. But the apartment was quiet. Still, just the same faint smell of stale coffee and detergent. I checked every corner before locking the door behind me. Then I sat down at my desk and started writing. At first, it was just lyrics. Angry, raw lines about betrayal and silence and the weight of being invisible. Then, melodies started forming in my head. I picked up my backup guitar, the cheap one I'd bought secondhand years ago, and started recording. It wasn't polished. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. For weeks, I poured everything I had into that project. Every ounce of pain, every bit of anger, every silent scream I'd held back for years went into those songs. I stopped worrying about getting views or sponsorships. I didn't even use my real name this time, just the alias Noah West. I wanted the music to speak for itself, without the baggage of my family's name attached to it. At first, nothing happened. The videos got a few hundred views here and there. A comment saying, "This sounds different. I like it." Another one saying, "You can feel the emotion in this." That was enough to keep me going. By the second month, things started to change. One of my songs, Glass Houses, got picked up by a small music channel that shared underground artists. Within a week, it had 100,000 views. Then came the messages. People from all over saying the song felt personal, that it helped them through things they couldn't even describe. A girl from Canada wrote, "I played this on repeat when my family disowned me. Thank you for making me feel less alone." I didn't respond to every message, but I read all of them. Each one reminded me that maybe, just maybe, everything I'd gone through wasn't for nothing. By month 3, I was getting emails from indie producers asking if I'd collaborate. One even offered to feature my song on a Netflix teen dramas background playlist. The royalties weren't life-changing yet, but they were enough to cover rent, comfortably. For the first time since leaving home, I felt something I hadn't in years: stability. I quit my grocery store job to focus on music full-time. Claire at the cafe insisted I stay part-time. "Just in case you need a place to breathe," she said. And honestly, I was grateful. She was one of the few people who saw me as a person, not a project. One day, after finishing my shift, she sat across from me at one of the tables and said, "You look lighter these days." I smiled for the first time in a while. "Yeah, I guess I'm finally getting somewhere." She nodded. Funny thing about success, it's loud enough that people start hearing it even when you're not trying to shout. I didn't realize how true that was until 2 weeks later. I got an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "Saw your video. Proud of you." It was from my aunt, Linda, the only relative who'd ever treated me like I mattered. She said she'd stumbled on my new channel by accident and had no idea it was me until she recognized my voice. "I always knew you'd find your way," she wrote. "Don't let anyone take this from you again." Reading that felt like a small healing. Like a piece of the broken puzzle of my past had quietly shifted back into place. But success has a way of attracting attention, even the kind you don't want. A month after Glass Houses went viral, I got a message on Instagram. No profile picture. No name. Just, "Nice song. Shame your parents don't know it's you." My heart sank. I didn't reply, but I didn't need to. I knew exactly who sent it. Caleb. He'd found me again. But this time, something was different. I wasn't scared. I wasn't the same quiet kid who walked out of the house that cold February night. I had something now, something he couldn't take from me. Proof that I could build a life without them. Instead of reacting, I stayed silent. I kept posting music, working, and slowly building my audience. Every song I released grew faster than the last. By the end of the year, my subscriber count had crossed 500,000. And then came the day that changed everything. I was at the cafe when Claire called me into her office. She handed me her phone with a grin. "Look," she said. It was an article, "The anonymous musician behind Glass Houses revealed. Meet Noah West." My real name wasn't in it, but the world was starting to notice me. Record labels were reaching out. Interviews, features, even small TV spots. I should have been over the moon, and part of me was, but another part of me felt the weight of what was coming. Because fame, even small fame, has a way of dragging ghosts back into your life. That night, as I was packing up my recording gear, I heard the faint buzz of my phone. A text from an unknown number. "Heard you're famous now. Guess mom and dad were wrong about you." See, no apology. No acknowledgement of what he'd done. Just that smug, passive-aggressive tone he'd mastered since childhood. I didn't reply. I didn't block him either. I just let the message sit there, a reminder. But I wasn't naive. I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't stop there. Caleb thrived on control, and losing me, must have driven him insane. Sure enough, within a few weeks, my parents reached out. This time, not with guilt trips or insults. Just carefully crafted messages that sounded rehearsed. "Mom, we saw you on the news. We're so proud of you. Maybe we could come to one of your shows." "Dad, you've really made something of yourself, son. Let's put the past behind us." I stared at those messages for a long time, reading and rereading them. The same people who disowned me, humiliated me, called me ungrateful, now wanted to celebrate me. And maybe a few months earlier, I would have been tempted to believe they'd changed. But I'd learned something important about them. Their love was conditional. It existed only when I was small enough for them to control. Still, I didn't delete the messages. Not yet. Because a part of me, the strategist in me, realized that I might finally have the upper hand. I didn't respond, but I started documenting everything. The messages, the calls, the comments on my videos from anonymous accounts that somehow always knew too much about my life. I even installed a camera inside my apartment this time, one facing the door, one by the window. If Caleb or my parents wanted to play games again, I was going to be ready. Meanwhile, I kept rising. The label offer came in February, exactly 1 year after my 18th birthday, the night I'd left home. A poetic full circle. They wanted to sign me for a small album deal, creative freedom intact. I signed it that same week. Within months, I was performing small live sets around the city. The crowds weren't huge, but they were mine. Every person there sang along to lyrics I'd written alone in that broken apartment. Every cheer, every clap felt like taking back another piece of what my family had stolen from me. And the money started to come in. Not rich money, but enough to breathe, to pay off debts, to upgrade my studio, to finally buy a new guitar. A better one. When the first royalty check cleared, I stood in my apartment holding it and couldn't help but laugh. I wasn't laughing at the number. I was laughing at the irony. Because for years, my parents had told me that following my passion was a waste of time, that I needed to be realistic, that I'd end up begging them for help. And now, I was earning more from my waste of time than they ever made in a year. I didn't post about it. I didn't brag. But word got around anyway. My aunt called one night, saying she'd heard from someone in the family that my parents were bragging to their church friends about how successful their musician son was. The same people who once told me I was a disappointment were now using my name for attention. At first, I brushed it off. Let them talk. But then something happened that made me realize this wasn't harmless pride. It was another setup. One morning, I got an invitation in the mail. No return address, just elegant handwriting on thick paper. "You are cordially invited to celebrate Caleb's graduation and new career opportunity." The address? My parents' house. And at the bottom, written in my mom's neat cursive, were the words, "It would mean the world if you came." I stared at that invitation for a long time. It wasn't an olive branch, it was bait. And for the first time since I'd left, I didn't feel afraid. I felt ready. Because I had something I'd never had before, leverage. They thought I was still that quiet kid they could walk over. They didn't realize that the same silence they used to mistake for weakness had turned into something else entirely: focus. So, I put the invitation down, leaned back in my chair, and whispered to myself, "All right, Caleb, let's see how you handle the spotlight when it's not all about you." Because this time, I wasn't going there to make peace. I was going there to make history. The invitation sat on my desk for a full day before I touched it again. Every time I glanced at it, I felt the same mix of irritation and curiosity. A graduation celebration, huh? The timing was too perfect. My career was finally taking off. My name was trending on a few music sites, and now suddenly they wanted me at a family gathering. I could practically hear Caleb's voice behind it, smooth, smug, already rehearsing whatever public humiliation he was planning. But this time, the difference was simple. I wasn't walking in as the forgotten kid. I was walking in as someone who finally had control. So, I decided I'd go, but not unprepared. The first thing I did was call Aunt Linda. She'd always been my quiet ally, the one who whispered encouragement when everyone else dismissed me. I told her about the invite, about the break-in, and about Caleb's little documentary that nearly wrecked my reputation. There was a pause on the line before she said, "Owen, if you're going, you need to make sure the truth comes out on your terms, not theirs." That stuck with me. So, I spent the next week planning. I didn't tell a soul, not even Claire. I bought a couple of hidden lapel microphones and a pen camera. Nothing fancy, just reliable enough to capture every word. I rehearsed in my head what I might say, how I'd act. No yelling, no losing control this time. Just calm, deliberate precision. The night of the event arrived faster than I expected. Their house looked exactly the same as the day I left. Neat lawn, white shutters, lights glowing through the big windows like a picture-perfect postcard. But as I stood there on the porch, it didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a stage. When Mom opened the door, her smile was immediate, wide, and unnatural. "Owen," she exclaimed, pulling me into a hug that felt rehearsed. "You came. Wouldn't miss it," I said with a polite smile. The house was full of people, relatives, neighbors, even a few of Caleb's college friends. There were banners that said "Congratulations, Caleb," and a big collage of photos showing his journey. I noticed that one of those photos was the same childhood picture he'd left in my apartment after the break-in. A chill ran through me, but I didn't show it. Caleb spotted me from across the room. He froze for a split second, not expecting me to actually show up, then broke into that practiced grin. "Well, look who it is," he said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "The prodigal son." I just nodded. "Congrats, Caleb. Guess we're both doing all right these days." He smirked. "Yeah, though some of us didn't need to cry online for sympathy to get there." The people around us laughed, uncomfortable, unsure if it was a joke or a jab. I smiled through it, every nerve in my body telling me to stay calm. "You're right," I said evenly. "Some of us just had to learn to work without handouts." His smile faltered, just slightly. I could tell he hadn't expected me to be collected. He thrived on reaction, on me getting flustered. Not tonight. Dinner was served about an hour later. The table was long and overly formal, Mom sitting at one end, Dad at the other, with Caleb and me across from each other in the center. The air was thick with small talk and tension. At one point, Mom raised her glass. "We're just so proud of both our boys," she said sweetly. "Caleb for graduating, and Owen for, well, whatever it is you're doing these days." A few chuckles rippled around the table. My aunt shot me a sympathetic glance, but I stayed silent, letting them dig their own hole. Then Dad leaned forward. "We heard your music's doing well," he said, pretending to sound casual. "Maybe you could invest in something meaningful. Help out your family a little." There it was. The real reason I was invited. I set my glass down. "Help out how?" Mom smiled tightly. "Well, your brother's starting his own practice. He's got the brains, but he could use a partner. Someone with resources." "Resources?" I repeated, my voice calm but sharp. "You mean money?" Dad chuckled like I was being dramatic. "It's not about money, son. It's about family. Caleb's success is all of ours." I let out a small laugh. Interesting, because when I was struggling, I don't remember anyone saying my pain was the family's too. The room went still. Caleb leaned back in his chair, trying to regain control. "Come on, Owen. Don't be bitter. This could be a great opportunity for you to make things right." I tilted my head. "Make things right." He nodded. "You know, after the whole video mess, people might have forgiven you, But the internet never forgets. Aligning with me, a respected professional, could help clean your image. For a moment, I couldn't even speak. I just stared at him, realizing how deep his arrogance went. He really believed he was doing me a favor. I smiled then, slow and deliberate. You're right, Caleb. The internet doesn't forget. And that's when I pulled my phone from my pocket, turned the screen toward him, and pressed play. It was a short clip, maybe a minute long, but every word was crystal clear. His voice, his face, sitting in my apartment, holding my stolen guitar, laughing. You should have stayed humble, little bro. Maybe this will teach you. The table fell silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Caleb's expression froze. Where did you? I installed cameras after the first time you broke in, I said calmly. Guess you forgot about those. Mom's fork clattered onto her plate. Caleb, what is this? He stammered, his face pale. It's fake. He's lying. But I was already pulling out the second piece of evidence, a printed police report from the break-in. I didn't press charges before, I said. Didn't want to ruin your life. But seeing as you're still lying about it, maybe it's time I stop protecting you. My father looked between us, his face red. You recorded your brother? I turned to him. No, he recorded me. He made fake videos to ruin my name, broke into my home, and stole from me. I just documented the truth. Whispers spread around the table. Aunt Linda's hand covered her mouth. Caleb looked cornered, his jaw tightening. You can't prove. Actually, I said, cutting him off, I can. I tapped my phone again, this time opening a private web page, my lawyer's website. Meet my new manager. And yes, he's also an attorney. We've been preparing a civil case for months. Libel, defamation, property theft. All neatly documented. The color drained completely from Caleb's face. Mom reached for him, whispering, Tell me this isn't true. He didn't answer. I leaned back, calm, steady. Don't worry, I'm not pressing charges yet. But I wanted everyone here to see who the real victim is. And if any of you ever repeat what he posted about me again, I looked around the table, my voice quiet but firm. You'll be hearing from him too. I slid my chair back and stood up. No yelling, no tears, just quiet power. Before I left, I turned to my mother. You once said I should be more like Caleb. I think I finally understand why that was such a terrible idea. Then I looked at Caleb one last time. Frozen, humiliated, his perfect image cracked for everyone to see. By the way, I said with a faint smile, I'll be releasing a new song next week. It's called Family Business. Thought you might enjoy it. I walked out before anyone could say a word. Outside, the air felt sharp and clean, like the first breath after being underwater too long. I could hear murmurs from inside, disbelief, anger, the crumbling sound of a reputation collapsing. When I got in my car, I sat there for a minute, letting the moment sink in. The same house that once made me feel small was now just another backdrop, a place I'd outgrown. I turned on the engine, rolled down the window, and drove away without looking back. And that night, when I got home, I picked up my new guitar and wrote a final verse to a song I'd been working on. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was calm, the kind of peace that comes when you stop needing revenge and start living like you've already won. Because that's the thing about people who try to destroy you. They never expect you to rise quietly. They expect you to break. But I didn't break. I rebuilt. And this time, they had to watch. The fallout came faster than I expected. By the next morning, the family group chat, which I hadn't opened in over a year, was a battlefield. Dozens of messages, arguments, accusations. It was like lighting a match in a room full of gasoline and walking away before the explosion. I didn't even have to reply. They were tearing each other apart without me. My aunt texted first. Aunt Linda, you did the right thing. They needed to be exposed. Don't let anyone guilt you for defending yourself. I thanked her, but she didn't know half of it. The confrontation at that dinner had gone viral in its own way, not online, but inside the community where my parents and Caleb thrived. Their perfect reputation, the one they protected for years like it was sacred, was finally cracked open for everyone to see. Word spread quickly through relatives and friends. The golden family wasn't so golden anymore. Apparently, a few of Caleb's friends who were at the dinner filmed snippets after I left. Nothing incriminating from my side, but enough to show Caleb stammering, my mom crying, and my dad yelling about betrayal. Someone posted it on a local gossip forum, and within days, it made its way around our small town. Suddenly, My family wasn't the model of perfection. They were the cautionary tale. Mom called me 3 days later. Her voice was shaky, tired. "Owen, please. You've humiliated us." "Mom," I said calmly, "I didn't humiliate you. I just stopped covering for you." She tried to sound sympathetic, that same old tone she'd use when she wanted control. "Your brother is devastated. He hasn't left his room." "Good," I said, before I could stop myself. Then softer, "Maybe he'll finally know what it feels like." She sighed, sniffling. "We're family. We should be helping each other, not destroying each other." That line almost made me laugh. I was never family to you, Mom. I was just the comparison point. The reminder of what Caleb wasn't. There was silence on the other end, and for once, she didn't have a quick response. Just a small, broken, "We didn't mean for it to go this far." But it had, and now there was no going back. After that call, I blocked her number. Not out of anger this time, but out of peace. In the weeks that followed, the ripples of that night spread wider. Caleb's graduation opportunity? Gone. The practice he'd been bragging about turned out to be an internship offer, one that was quietly withdrawn after his employers saw the police report I'd filed, and then reactivated when I gave them permission to view the evidence. Apparently, they didn't want someone with a pending civil case for break-in and libel around their clients. I didn't even have to lift a finger. The truth had a way of doing its own work once it was free. My parents tried damage control. They called relatives, pleaded with friends, even sent out long messages about how misunderstood Caleb was. But the more they tried to fix it, the worse it got. Everyone had seen the cracks now. The favoritism, the manipulation, the double standards. Even my dad's co-workers started distancing themselves. My aunt told me she overheard one of them whispering, "Guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." For a family obsessed with appearances, that kind of quiet judgment was the ultimate punishment. And Caleb, well, he fell the hardest. A few weeks later, I got a message from one of his old friends. "Dude, your brother's been losing it. He won't stop ranting about you. Says you ruined his life." I didn't reply, but I won't lie. It felt good to read that. Not because I wanted him destroyed, but because for once, he was the one feeling powerless. Then came the night that closed the chapter completely. It was late, past midnight, when I heard a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a split second, my chest tightened, thinking maybe it was him again. But when I opened the door, Caleb was standing there, drenched from the rain, looking nothing like the arrogant brother I remembered. His eyes were red, his posture slouched. He wasn't smirking. He wasn't performing. He looked small. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. I hesitated but stepped aside. He walked in slowly, glancing around the apartment like he was seeing it for the first time. He sat down at the table, and for a long time, neither of us spoke. The sound of the rain hitting the window filled the silence. Finally, he said, "You destroyed me." I exhaled, leaning against the counter. "No, Caleb. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped letting you drag me down with you." He rubbed his face, shaking his head. "You think you're better than me now?" I shook mine. "No. I just learned the difference between love and control." He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "They won't even talk to me. Dad's furious. Mom cries all the time. Aunt Linda won't answer my calls. It's like everyone turned on me overnight." "That's what happens," I said softly, "when you live off lies. They catch up eventually." He looked up at me then, his voice trembling. "I didn't think it'd go this far. I just wanted you to stop making me look bad." That line hit me harder than I expected. Stop making me look bad. That's all this had ever been about. It wasn't jealousy of what I had. It was jealousy of who I was becoming. I was proof that he wasn't the perfect son they thought he was. "You did that yourself, Caleb," I said. "All I did was tell the truth." He looked down, then nodded slowly. I guess I deserved it. For the first time, he wasn't defensive. He wasn't smirking or blaming me. He looked human, regretful even. He stood to leave, but paused by the door. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it." I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't believe him, but because I wasn't ready to give him what he wanted, absolution. Not yet. He left quietly, disappearing into the rain. I never saw him again after that night. A month later, Aunt Linda told me he'd moved out of state, trying to start over. My parents sold the house and downsized. From what she said, Dad had a mild stroke, and Mom spends most of her time taking care of him. I didn't feel joy hearing it, just a kind of melancholy acceptance. The past had finally collapsed under its own weight. Meanwhile, my life kept moving forward. The album I'd been working on, Glass Houses, released that spring. It debuted modestly, but word of mouth carried it fast. Critics called it haunting, sincere, and a quiet masterpiece. The final track, 18, was the most personal one I'd ever written. It told the story of that night, the birthday I never got to have, the family that tried to control me, and the freedom I found by walking away. It wasn't angry. It was reflective, and people connected to it deeply. One of the comments under the official upload said, "This song sounds like someone finally closing a chapter." They were right. When the royalties came in, I donated part of them to a youth shelter near my old neighborhood. Kids who aged out of the system, kids who had nowhere to go when they turned 18. It felt like giving that scared version of myself a voice, a chance, a home. Sometimes, I'd still think about my family, not with hatred, but with distance. Like characters from a book I'd already finished reading. And every once in a while, when I played 18 live, I'd spot someone in the crowd with that same haunted look I used to wear. Someone who'd been told their feelings didn't matter. And when I sang the last line, I sang it for them. Because I knew what it meant to finally be seen. One night, after a show, a fan came up to me. She looked nervous, maybe 17 or 18, holding a crumpled piece of paper with my lyrics on it. "That line," she said quietly, "the one about walking away to become real, it saved me." I smiled at her and said the only thing I could think of, then it did what it was meant to. When she left, I sat alone backstage, looking at the empty stage lights fading to black. It hit me that my story, the pain, the betrayal, the silence, had turned into something that healed others. That was the real revenge. Not the confrontation, not the exposure, not even the downfall of the people who tried to destroy me. The real revenge was living a life so honest, so full, that the ones who broke me would have to watch from afar, powerless to rewrite it. And as for me, I finally celebrated that 18th birthday, 1 year late, but properly this time. Just me, a few real friends, and a cake with too many candles. When they asked what I was wishing for, I smiled and said, "Nothing. I already got it." Because for the first time in my life, I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their love. I was free. And freedom, after a lifetime of being silenced, was the sweetest revenge of all. My name is Oliver. I'm 28, and for most of my life, I've been the invisible one in my family. You know, the one people forget to text, the one left out of group photos, the one they remember when they need a ride or a favor, but never when it actually matters. I grew up with a mom who always had a sharp tongue and a selective memory. Somehow, she remembered every mistake I made, but forgot every award, every time I helped her, every birthday card I saved up for. I have a sister, Ava, who learned early on that playing perfect got her everything. She smiled, curtsied, got good grades, and got treated like royalty. I was the opposite, quiet, skeptical, too blunt for my own good. That didn't sit well with our family culture, where smiles were currency and truth was a nuisance. For years, I tried to earn my place. I brought pies to dinners I wasn't invited to, gifts to birthdays where no one noticed me arriving, and compliments to relatives who never said my name correctly. I played along at first, thinking if I just tried hard enough, they'd eventually see me. But by the time I hit 25, the veil had lifted. I realized my efforts didn't change a thing. My place at the table was never going to be permanent. Still, there's a certain kind of ache that doesn't fully go away, no matter how logically you understand it. So when Thanksgiving rolled around last year, I debated whether to go. My cousin Maya was the only person in that entire web of relatives who genuinely treated me like a human being. She was younger by 2 years, but more emotionally mature than half the adults in the room. We'd grown closer over the years, DMs, occasional late-night calls, honest check-ins. So when she texted me the day before Thanksgiving saying, "You better show up. You know I saved you a spot," I caved. I figured maybe, if only for her, it was worth showing up again. I drove the 40 minutes out to my uncle's house, where Thanksgiving was always hosted. Classic suburbia, manicured lawn, tacky inflatable turkey in the front yard, and that unmistakable scent of butter, spices, and tension wafting out the open windows. I parked in my usual spot, 3 houses down, because my uncle's driveway was always full when I came late. As I walked up the front steps with a bottle of wine I knew no one would touch, I saw them through the screen door. My mom, my aunt, my sister, my uncle. Laughing, talking, smiling like it was a photo shoot for Dysfunctional Families Anonymous. I didn't expect a parade or even a hello. But what happened next wasn't just cold, it was deliberate. As I reached for the doorknob, the door opened, just a crack, and there was my Uncle Ron, filling the frame like a human roadblock. He didn't greet me, didn't smile. He just looked at me with that smug little twitch in his mouth and said, "You're not family anymore, Oliver. You need to leave." At first, I thought he was joking. I actually laughed, expecting the punchline. But he didn't move. Behind him, I saw my mom pass 2 plates across the table, one of them with the name card I recognized. Mine. She handed it, laughing, to Ava's boyfriend, a guy I'd only met twice. They clinked glasses. My chair, my seat, was filled before I even got a foot in the door. "I'm serious," Uncle Ron added. "You showing up just causes tension." I blinked. "Causes tension?" I repeated. "I haven't even walked in yet." He gave a mock sympathetic shrug. "Let's not make this worse than it needs to be. Just head home, okay?" I looked over his shoulder, locking eyes with my mom. She didn't flinch, didn't call him off. She just raised an eyebrow and took a sip of her wine like she was watching a mildly interesting TV show. For a moment, I thought about fighting back, raising my voice, making a scene, but I didn't. Instead, I did something that caught even me off guard. I nodded. Calmly, quietly. I stepped back. I walked down those steps with the same bottle of wine still in my hand, got in my car, and drove 2 blocks before pulling over. My hands were shaking, not with rage, but with something colder, something more final. Because I'd seen all I needed to see. I wasn't family to them. I was a placeholder, a joke, a scapegoat when they needed someone to criticize, and an empty chair when they needed a space filler. But here's the thing. I had something they didn't know about. Months ago, I'd been slowly preparing for the moment I stopped trying. Something Maya and I had talked about more than once, over whispered calls and shared stories of being left out, overlooked, dismissed. She wasn't as loud about it, but she saw it too. The hypocrisy, the favoritism, the manipulation that danced beneath every family gathering. She once told me, if we ever wanted to break the illusion, all it would take is one spark. So I picked up my phone, opened the saved message. It had taken me weeks to write, to time it just right. It wasn't a rant, or a guilt trip, or some long-winded attempt at closure. It was just the truth, laid bare, sent to a very select group of people in that house. And I hit send. 5 minutes later, as I sat parked at the corner of their street, engine idling, I watched through the rearview mirror. The front door opened. First it was Maya, storming out, face red with anger. Then my cousin Daniel. Then his girlfriend. Then my aunt's best friend, the one who always brought dessert and had a soft spot for me. One by one, they left. I couldn't hear the words being shouted inside, but I could guess. The illusion was cracking. And that was just the beginning. Maya was the first to call. I saw her name flash across my screen before I even pulled out of my spot. I picked up, heart pounding, not because I was nervous, but because I hadn't expected it to unravel this fast. "Oliver," she snapped, not even waiting for me to speak. "What did you just do?" I paused. "You read it?" "Of course I read it. So did everyone else." Uncle Ron's face turned purple. "Your mom tried to play dumb, and Ava just stood there frozen like she didn't know what planet she was on." I could hear the wind rushing past her phone. She was walking fast. Maybe pacing. Maybe on her way to her car. Maya was quiet for a second, and when she spoke again, her voice had dropped. "Why didn't you tell me you were recording them?" That was the thing. A few months back, after years of being talked down to, dismissed, and lied about behind my back, I'd started collecting receipts. Not out of paranoia, but because I was tired of gaslighting. I'd record casual conversations, save texts, take screenshots. I had video clips of my mom telling Ava she should just take the credit for something I'd done. A voice memo of Uncle Ron saying I only showed up to family events for handouts, even though I never once asked for anything. And maybe the worst of them all, an audio recording from my birthday the year before, when they forgot I existed, even though I had been sitting right there at the table. That Thanksgiving message I sent. It wasn't just a note. It was a compilation. I had stitched together the greatest hits of family hypocrisy into a 5-minute clip. It had context, timestamps, and just enough raw silence between the insults to let it all sink in. I sent it to 7 people: Maya, Daniel, my Aunt Laura, my cousin's fiancé, my mom's sister, who had always been on the fence, and 2 family friends who'd always believed the curated version of the family that my mother and Uncle Ron sold like gospel. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you caught in the middle, I said quietly. Maya scoffed. I'm already in the middle. But I'm glad you did it. I exhaled, my grip on the steering wheel finally loosening. Are you okay? I will be. I'm done with them. Click. I sat there in the silence of my car, staring out the windshield, watching as more cars began pulling away from the house. A few people stood on the porch, looking confused. My mom's voice rose above them all. She was shouting something I couldn't make out, but I didn't need to hear the words. I'd heard versions of them my entire life. The next call came from Aunt Laura. Oliver, she said, breathless. Where are you? I debated lying. Down the street. Stay there. I'm coming. She hung up, and true to her word, 5 minutes later she climbed into my passenger seat. Her eyes were wide, but not with anger, more like someone who had just stumbled into a crime scene she wasn't expecting to find. I listened to everything, she said. Twice. I said nothing. I never knew it was that bad. I mean, I knew they were. Cruel sometimes. I just didn't realize how calculated it all was. I looked over at her. You really didn't know? She winced. I saw pieces. But your mom always made it seem like you were the problem. She said you were dramatic. That you twisted things. I didn't want to believe she'd lie. She didn't lie, I said softly. She edited. Aunt Laura stared at the dashboard. This is going to rip the family apart. Then maybe it was already broken, I said. That evening, I went home to a flood of messages. Some angry, some apologetic, a few confused. But what stood out the most was the silence from the people who should have said something. My mom, Ava, and Uncle Ron. Not one of them reached out. Not even a call. Not a single word. Until the next morning. That's when I saw the post. My mother, in her usual performative style, had posted a long status on Facebook about betrayal, misunderstanding, and private matters being aired for attention. She never said my name, but the comments made it clear who she was talking about. People offered sympathy, called me disrespectful, said things like, you raised him better than that, girl. But something unexpected happened in the thread. Maya commented. So did Daniel. Then Aunt Laura. One by one, people began pushing back. They called out the manipulation, the double standards, even sharing their own stories of being mistreated or lied to. The thread exploded. Some relatives deleted their comments. A few blocked me outright. But the tide had shifted. For once, I wasn't alone. For once, people saw it too. That weekend, I got a message request from Ava's boyfriend. It said, I didn't know they were like that. I'm sorry. If I'd known what I was taking part in, I would have never sat in your chair. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The message had already been sent, and not just the one in the group chat. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in my own story. I felt like the author. And that story, it wasn't finished yet. The Sunday after Thanksgiving, I got a knock at my door. I live in a quiet part of town. Nothing fancy, just a modest apartment above a bakery that smells like cinnamon rolls every morning. It's peaceful, quiet. Nothing like the house I grew up in, where every door slam felt like a gunshot and every holiday dinner was a performance for the neighbors. I wasn't expecting visitors. Most of my friends had already texted me after the video went around. Some supportive, some shocked. Maya had been calling me daily, but I wasn't prepared to open the door and see my dad. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. He looked older than I remembered, gray creeping further into his beard, that familiar leather jacket a little more worn. He didn't smile, just stood there, hands in his pockets, rocking slightly on his heels like he didn't know what to say. Hi, he finally muttered. Didn't expect to see you, I said, stepping aside but not exactly welcoming him in. He hesitated, then walked in anyway. I watched him scan the apartment, clean, quiet, filled with small things that made me happy. The records on the shelf. The stack of books I actually had time to read now. The framed photo of Maya and me from the one Thanksgiving we snuck out and got burgers instead of dealing with the family circus. I saw the video, he said. Or clips of it. Your aunt sent it to me. I waited. He sat down on the edge of my couch, looking at the floor like it held the answers he didn't know how to ask for. Your mom, she's been losing her mind over this. Says you set her up. Says you twisted everything. I leaned against the counter. Did I? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he rubbed the bridge of his nose like he was trying to press the tension out through his skin. I don't know, Oliver. I mean, I knew things were bad between you two. But hearing it like that? It was hard to listen to. I folded my arms. Hard for who? He looked up. For me. Because it made me realize I let it happen. For years. And there it was. The first real sentence my father had ever said that felt like a mirror instead of a dismissal. I didn't say anything. I didn't trust myself to speak yet. He shifted on the couch. You remember when you were 13 and your mom threw out your art portfolio? I nodded slowly. That day had stayed with me. Months of work tossed into the trash because I'd gotten a B in science. Yeah. She told me you'd drawn something disrespectful. I drew a cartoon of her yelling at me. That was it. He let out a dry laugh. I believed her. Never even asked to see it. That was the pattern, I said, and I was surprised at how steady my voice was. She'd say something. You'd nod. Ava would play along. And I'd be left trying to figure out if I was crazy or just not worth the truth. He looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't. Instead, he sat there, nodding slightly, letting the silence stretch. I can't fix what happened, he said eventually. But I wanted you to know. I see it now. I wish I'd said something sooner. I wish I'd stepped in. I believed he meant it. I really did. But part of me also knew that his regret didn't undo years of complicity. He hadn't been cruel, but he'd been silent. And sometimes, silence is just a different kind of wound. I appreciate you saying that, I said. But I don't know what you want from me. He exhaled. I don't know either. I guess I wanted to see how you're doing. I'm doing better, I said truthfully. Now that I'm out of it. Now that I've stopped pretending they'll change. He nodded again. They're planning damage control. Of course they are. They think if they just wait it out, people will move on. I raised an eyebrow. And will they? He looked tired. Some already have. Some are scared to pick sides. But a few? They're furious. Especially with what you said about the money. Oh, that part. See, what I hadn't mentioned to anyone outside that original message was the money trail. I had been giving quiet financial support to several family members for years. Rent, car repairs, even a small loan to Ava once when she said her boyfriend was abusive and she needed to leave. I never asked for it back. Never told anyone. I did it because I thought maybe, just maybe, it would earn me a place in the family again. That stopped 3 months ago. I didn't make a scene about it. I just started redirecting my help toward Maya, toward friends, toward people who actually treated me like a person. The video I sent out included a note at the end. This is why I stopped paying for your lives. Apparently, that stung more than the audio clips. They're saying you're punishing them, my dad said. They punish themselves, I replied. I just stopped rewarding it. He didn't argue. After a while, he stood. I should go? I just wanted you to know you were right. About all of it. He started toward the door, then paused. If there's ever a way back, for us, I mean. I hope you'll let me take it. And then he left. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there, in the quiet, wondering how long it would take for the next wave to hit. Because I knew the family wasn't done yet. My mom didn't let go of power that easily. Ava never handled humiliation well. And Thanksgiving might have been the spark, but Christmas was around the corner. And if they thought they could pretend nothing had changed, they were about to be reminded. I hadn't even started yet. By the time December rolled around, the silence was deafening. The group chat for family Christmas plans that usually lit up with potluck assignments and recycled memes from our Aunt Margie was unusually quiet. The last message in there was Maya's. Let me know when you all are ready to take some accountability. No one responded. No haha reactions. No snide remarks. Just a vacuum of guilt pretending to be peace. I wasn't invited, of course. Not that I needed the invite. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was missing something. I didn't need to force a smile through another dinner where Ava's career was celebrated like a Nobel Prize and mine was ignored. I didn't need to listen to my mom laugh at jokes about me or hear Uncle Ron say things like, Oliver's always been sensitive, like I was some malfunctioning appliance. I was free now. Free from obligation, from expectation, from the heavy weight of being the family's emotional punching bag. But I wasn't done. Not yet. See, the recording I sent out at Thanksgiving was just the beginning. It had shaken their image. Forced conversations they didn't want to have. But it hadn't truly forced them to change. They were hiding now, licking their wounds, waiting for the drama to pass. I could feel it. That smug, simmering belief that eventually I'd fade from memory and they'd reclaim the narrative. So I made sure they couldn't. I started with the money. Quietly, methodically, and without warning, I called in the favors. That $3,000 loan to Ava? I sent her a formal letter through my lawyer, reminding her that while I had originally treated it as a gift, the recent revelation of her lies about escaping an abusive relationship voided that understanding. She was still with the guy. By the way, he showed up to Thanksgiving in my seat, laughing with my mom. I gave her 60 days to repay. No threats, no interest, just a paper trail. I canceled the recurring bank transfer that had been covering part of Uncle Ron's property tax. He never asked for help directly. He was too proud for that. But a few years ago, he hinted at tough times, and I stepped in. Every November, like clockwork, I'd send the amount due. Not this year. On December 3rd, his bank declined the payment request. My mom, though, she was the biggest one. For 5 years, I'd been covering the lease on her car. She never thanked me. Not once. It was expected. She made it clear that, as her son, it was my duty. I let it slide for too long. She didn't know the car was still in my name. On December 10th, I repossessed it. The phone calls came in like fireworks. First Ava, shrill and furious. Then Uncle Ron, trying to reason with me like I was some angry child. And finally, my mother. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just called and said, "So this is who you really are?" And I replied, "No, this is who you made me become." Click. Christmas Eve came. I didn't sit alone. I spent it with Maya and a few of our mutual friends. We made dinner together in her apartment, lit candles, played board games, and exchanged gifts that didn't need to impress anyone. It was the warmest holiday I'd had in years. Around midnight, Maya poured us each a glass of wine and sat beside me on the floor, pulling a blanket over our legs. "They called me," she said softly. "Let me guess," I said. "Damage control?" She nodded. "Your mom said I was choosing sides, that I was tearing the family apart." "You are," I said. "The part that needed to be torn down." She leaned her head on my shoulder. She also said something else, that she was going to set the record straight. I sighed. Of course she is. The next morning, I found out what she meant. My mom wrote a long post on Facebook, another performance, another attempt to flip the script. She talked about how families go through hard times, how sometimes private pain becomes public, and how some members are easily manipulated by false narratives. It was a masterclass in polished denial. No names, no specifics. Just enough ambiguity to draw sympathy from people who only knew the version of her she'd curated for years. I didn't respond. I didn't comment. I didn't need to. Because by then, the truth was already spreading on its own. Aunt Laura posted her own status, short but pointed. "Sometimes the only way to fix a broken family is to stop pretending it's not broken. Proud of you, Oliver." Daniel posted a screenshot of one of the texts my mom had sent him years ago, bad-mouthing me right after I helped him pay for college books. The caption was simple. We all saw it. We just didn't want to admit it. More and more people, cousins, old family friends, even one of Ava's college roommates, began commenting, messaging, reaching out. People I hadn't spoken to in years were apologizing, telling me they'd noticed things but didn't know how deep it went. It was like lifting the lid off a pressure cooker. Everyone had stories. Everyone had scars. And now, they weren't afraid to share them. A week after Christmas, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. From my mom. It wasn't an apology. It was a warning. She said I was destroying the family's reputation. That I was making enemies I couldn't afford. That there were consequences to embarrassing people in public. It read like the final act of someone who had lost control and didn't know how else to claw it back. I folded the letter once and dropped it in the trash. I didn't need to fight her anymore. The truth was winning on its own. By the time New Year's Eve rolled around, the family had split into two camps. There were the ones who clung to the old ways, defending my mom, pretending the recordings were taken out of context, dismissing every call out as drama. And then there were the ones who finally opened their eyes. They started organizing their own gatherings. Maya hosted a brunch in January and invited everyone she trusted. Over 20 people showed up. Uncle Ron wasn't one of them. Neither was Ava. Neither was my mother. I've had to grieve, in a way, not just the loss of a family I never truly had, but the version of me that kept waiting for their love to come wrapped in approval. I let that version die. Buried him with the guilt, the people-pleasing, the endless ache for validation. Now I'm living. I started writing again, something I hadn't done since high school. I launched a small freelance business. Maya and I are closer than ever. And every so often, someone reaches out. Someone who saw what happened, who recognized their own family in my story, who says, "Thank you for saying something." I've felt this way for years. So if you're reading this and thinking about the family members who mock you, who use your love like a leash, who only call when they need something, listen to me. You don't have to stay in that house just because your name is on the mailbox. You don't owe anyone your silence to keep the peace they never gave you. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is stand at the front door they slammed in your face, turn around, and never look back. I didn't lose a family. I shed one. And in the quiet that followed, I finally heard my own voice again. Clear, unapologetic, free. I always knew my family didn't think much of me. Growing up, I was the odd one out, the quiet kid who didn't fit into their mold. While my cousins boasted about their weekend parties and expensive clothes, I was the nerd who spent his time learning, working, and planning a way out. I wasn't interested in impressing anyone, least of all my arrogant, self-absorbed relatives. But as fate would have it, I ended up making it. I worked my ass off, built something for myself, and made more money than any of them ever had. Not that they cared. Or rather, not that they admitted they cared. They just pretended my success didn't exist until they saw a way to benefit from it. Which brings us to tonight. I hadn't planned on seeing them. In fact, I'd spent years avoiding these family gatherings because they were always the same. Condescending remarks, fake smiles, and constant reminders that, no matter what I achieved, I'd always be just Mark to them, the black sheep. But my mother, bless her heart, had practically begged me to come. Just one dinner, Mark. For me, it's been years. I caved. I regretted it the second I walked into that overpriced steakhouse. The entire extended family was already seated at a long, candlelit table, laughing and talking like something out of a movie. My cousin Jason, my biggest tormentor growing up, was in the center, grinning like he owned the place. The moment his eyes landed on me, that grin widened. Oh wow, look who decided to show up. Jason leaned back in his chair, his voice loud enough to turn a few heads. Didn't think you had time for us, big shot. I forced a polite smile and pulled out a chair near the end of the table. Jason frowned. Sorry, Mark, but that seat's taken. I glanced around. The only empty seats were next to Jason or his equally smug sister, Rachel. I reached for a different chair, but Rachel rolled her eyes. That one too. I blinked. You're kidding. Jason chuckled and leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. Mark, this table is for family. You can find a spot outside. Laughter. Not from everyone, but from enough people to make my jaw tighten. My mother looked uncomfortable, but she didn't say anything. She never did. My aunt smirked. My uncle shook his head like I was some embarrassing joke. And Jason? Jason looked pleased with himself. I could have left. I should have left. But instead, I smiled. Outside, huh? I said. Nah, I'll stay. I grabbed an empty chair from a nearby table and dragged it over, placing it just outside the main group, but still close enough that I was technically at the table. A waiter came over, looking uncertain, but I just waved him off and ordered a coffee. Jason and Rachel shared a look, but they didn't argue. Not yet. Then the real show began. I wasn't stupid. I knew why they wanted me here. They didn't care about catching up. They cared about flexing. All throughout dinner, they made a show of ordering the most expensive things on the menu. I'll take the Wagyu, Jason announced, flipping the menu shut. And the lobster. Oh, and another round of drinks for everyone. He shot me a smirk. We're celebrating, after all. Rachel grinned. Yeah, we should really enjoy ourselves tonight. Desserts too, my uncle chimed in. Get the most expensive ones. The waiters kept coming, and the bill kept climbing. I said nothing. I just sipped my coffee, watching them with an amused expression. Then, when the plates were empty, the wine glasses drained, and everyone was lounging back with satisfied sighs, the waiter arrived with the bill. $3, $2.47. He placed it directly in front of me. Jason stretched lazily. You got this right, Mark? Rachel giggled. Come on, it's nothing to you. Silence. The entire table was looking at me now, waiting. I let the moment stretch, then slowly picked up the bill, glancing over it like I actually cared about the total. Then I chuckled. A soft, knowing sound. Jason frowned. What's so funny? I leaned back, took another sip of my coffee, and grinned. Oh, I said. You guys have no idea who's covering it tonight. And with that, I placed the bill back down, right in front of Jason. Jason stared at the bill, blinking a few times as if trying to make sense of what just happened. I leaned back, looking completely at ease, watching the confusion spread across the table like wildfire. Wait, you're serious? Jason's voice dropped slightly, but there was a nervous edge to it now. His grin faltered, just for a second. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I took another slow sip of my coffee, watching his expression shift from confusion to realization, then to something far darker. Rachel, noticing the change, gave Jason a quick nudge. "Isn't your company doing well, Mark?" she asked sweetly, the edge of sarcasm nearly unnoticeable. "Surely a little dinner like this won't put a dent in your wallet." There it was. The expectation, the assumption that I had to pay for their indulgence, just because I was the successful one. They didn't care about the effort it took to get here. They didn't care that I'd busted my ass for years building my own business from the ground up. All they cared about was the money they thought I should share with them. But this wasn't just about money. No, this was about them thinking they could get away with treating me like dirt while benefiting from my success. Jason tried again, his voice now more forceful, though his smile was more a tight grimace. "Come on, Mark. You know you can afford it." He looked at the waiter and back at me, like he was about to give me one last chance to be the nice guy. "The bill's huge, but you're a businessman, right? Just swipe that card and call it a night." My mother, who had been silent up until now, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Mark, honey, please. It's just a dinner. It's a family gathering, and you know how they are." Her voice trailed off, as if she was trying to keep the peace, but I could tell she wasn't entirely on their side. My mother had always been the peacemaker, the one who never wanted to rock the boat. But this time, I could feel the frustration bubbling beneath the surface, the way she knew I was being taken advantage of, but didn't have the courage to say anything. I set the coffee cup down gently and looked around at the faces staring at me. My uncle, his big belly spilling over the top of his chair, was now leaning forward, his voice gruff. "Look, Mark, I don't know what's going on with you, but don't act like we don't know your situation. You've been making bank for months now. Don't be a child, pay the bill, and let's go home." He was practically demanding it now, his tone cold and calculating. The others around the table nodded, some of them still grinning, others just waiting for me to buckle under the pressure. It was clear that they thought I would cave, that I would just pay to avoid the awkwardness. But I wasn't going to cave. Not this time. Not after all these years of being belittled, of being the one they always mocked or ignored when it wasn't convenient for them. And it wasn't just that. No, there was something more satisfying about watching them squirm now that they had no idea what was coming. I smiled a little. Not a big, proud grin like Jason, but a small, almost playful smile. "All right," I said, my voice calm and controlled. "I'll pay the bill." A chorus of relieved sighs echoed around the table, some of them even clapping me on the back like I just won some moral victory. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Jason's face lit up. "See, that wasn't so hard, was it?" He gave a mock salute. "Thanks, big shot." I leaned forward, my smile never faltering. "Nah, I changed my mind. Good luck, guys." The silence at the table was instant, like someone had pressed the mute button. For a moment, no one moved. No one said a word. Jason's face shifted from confidence to something darker. He opened his mouth to protest, but I was already standing up, reaching for my jacket. I wasn't going anywhere just yet, but I wanted them to feel the tension rising. "By the way," I added, my voice low, "if you don't want to be responsible for this big check, you might want to think about how much you order next time." Jason's eyes were wide now, no longer the confident cousin who always took advantage of me. His jaw clenched, and he glanced around the table, clearly unsure what to do. He'd expected me to be the punching bag again. Instead, I was setting the rules for once. I turned to leave the table, walking slowly, knowing full well they would follow the script I had set up. The waiter was still standing there, waiting for someone to take charge. And then I heard it. "Hey," Jason snapped. "You can't just," but I didn't let him finish. "I'll be over there," I called back, gesturing to the lounge area a few feet away, out of sight from the main dining room. "Just let me know when you've figured it out." I walked away. I could feel the tension in the air as I made my way to the lounge. They didn't know how to handle it. They thought they could push me, guilt-trip me, and I'd just fold like I always had. But this time, I wasn't going to play their game. The arrogance, the entitlement, they were about to learn a lesson they wouldn't forget anytime soon. As I sank into the plush chair, I glanced back toward the dining area. Jason was standing there now, nervously adjusting his collar, talking in hushed tones with Rachel and my mother. Their voices were barely audible from where I sat, but I could make out a few words. "Mark's not going to. He'll pay, right? Don't make him mad." We need him for the bill. Do we have enough? The desperation was obvious. They were trying to figure out who could cover what, calculating how much they could possibly scrape together without actually reaching into their own pockets. They were about to learn that this time, I wasn't going to be their backup. Minutes passed. I checked my phone, acting like I didn't have a care in the world. But every few seconds, I'd glance over, just to catch a glimpse of their panic. The waiter was lingering nearby, probably giving them the side eye, waiting for them to make a decision. The longer this went on, the more obvious it became that they were in over their heads. It wasn't long before Jason made his way over to me, looking as if he'd just walked into a room filled with hot coals. His face was a mixture of frustration and something close to guilt. I stayed seated, taking my time before looking up at him. "What's up?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. He exhaled sharply, trying to hold it together. "Mark, this isn't funny. The bill is way higher than we thought. Can you just help us out this time? I mean, we're family, right?" I couldn't help but let out a small chuckle. "Oh, I'm not laughing, Jason. I'm serious. You guys wanted this meal. You ordered whatever you wanted without asking if I was cool with it. And now you're asking me to foot the bill? For the wine? For everything?" He paused, swallowing hard. "Look, man, we didn't realize it was going to be like this. I mean, it's just dinner, right? Can't you just, help out?" I leaned back in the chair, letting his words hang in the air for a moment. This was the same tired act they always pulled, no self-awareness, no accountability. They didn't care about me, they just cared about my money. "Jason, I'm done playing this game," I said finally. "You're all grown-ups, right? You can afford to pay for your own meals. I'm not your bank anymore. I don't care if you're my family. That doesn't mean I owe you anything." His expression shifted from desperation to something more defensive, his eyes narrowing. "You're going to let us pay for all of this? After everything we've done for you? After all the times we've been there for you?" I shot him a flat look. "What? You mean all the times you've asked me to pay for everything while you sat back and acted like I owed you something? That doesn't count as being there for me, Jason." Behind him, Rachel and my mother were watching closely, and I could tell they were growing more and more anxious by the second. They knew this wasn't going how they'd planned. I could see the wheels turning in Rachel's head, probably trying to figure out some way to manipulate the situation. My mom, on the other hand, looked more panicked than I'd ever seen her. "Well, we can't just leave, can we?" Rachel's voice was high-pitched now, cracking with stress. "I mean, we're not going to just walk away from a $3,000 bill. That would be insane." I raised an eyebrow. "No one's walking away, Rachel. You guys are staying and paying. I'm done with this charade. I don't care if you're my family. You've been taking advantage of me for years, and I'm done." Jason's face was turning red now, frustration bubbling up to the surface. "You can't be serious. You're just going to let us suffer here? We're stuck with the bill, Mark, and I'm stuck with the bill? You think I'm the one who made those choices?" I interrupted. "You all decided what you were ordering. You made the choices, now live with the consequences." Rachel opened her mouth to argue, but my mother cut her off, her voice trembling. "Mark, please. This isn't the time for this. We're family, remember? Just help us out. You can afford it." Her words hung in the air like a weight. They knew I could afford it. That's the thing. They knew how much I was making, how successful I'd become. But they never saw that success as something I'd earned. No, they just saw it as an opportunity to mooch off me. I stood up slowly, straightening my jacket. "No, I can't afford it, Mom. You can. Jason can. Rachel can. But I'm not covering your mess this time." I turned toward the waiter, who had been hovering nearby, clearly aware of what was going on. I caught his eye and gave him a quick nod, signaling that I was done. And just like that, I walked toward the exit, not looking back. I heard the murmurs as I stepped out of the lounge and into the cool evening air. I didn't look back. The sound of footsteps following me made my pace slow, but I wasn't about to turn around. They dug their own hole. Now, it was time to see how deep they'd have to dig to get out of it. It wasn't long before I reached the parking lot, my hands stuffed in my pockets as I stood there, staring at my car. I could hear the clatter of heels approaching, and then Rachel's voice calling my name. "Mark, wait." I didn't respond. My heart rate was steady. I was calm, but I could hear her desperation, how she was trying to pull me back into their drama. I didn't want to play this game anymore. "Mark," she called again, her voice shaking. "You can't just leave. Please, this is serious." I turned around, cutting her off mid-sentence. "You think I don't know what's serious, Rachel? You think I don't know exactly what you're doing? She stopped in her tracks, and for a moment, there was silence. The wind rustled through the trees, and I could feel the tension between us. She was struggling to find words, but I wasn't going to let her. Not this time. You've been using me for years, I said, my voice quiet but firm. Every time something comes up, it's, Mark, you'll cover this, right? It's never, hey, Mark, how are you? It's always been about what I can do for you. Well, I'm done. Her eyes flickered, and I could see the guilt flash across her face before she quickly masked it with an angry expression. You can't just leave us hanging like this, she snapped, her voice growing louder. We need you. You can't just walk away from family when we're in a tough spot. I felt my jaw tighten, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm not walking away from family, Rachel. I'm walking away from your entitlement. This isn't family. This is manipulation. And I'm done letting you use me. For a moment, she just stood there, her face flushed, trying to figure out what to say next. But before she could respond, I saw Jason and my mom emerge from the restaurant, looking frantic. Jason's shirt was half untucked, and he looked like he'd been running. My mom's expression was a mixture of guilt and panic, her eyes wide as she spotted me standing there, just out of reach. Mark, please, we don't know what we're going to do, my mom said, her voice cracking. We can't afford this. You're the only one who can help us. Her words hit me, but not in the way she expected. I felt a strange, almost detached satisfaction as I watched their desperation unfold. They had pushed me for so long, and now they were realizing that there was a cost to everything. You think I'm just going to bail you out again, huh? I asked, my voice more quiet now. You think this is just about money? Well, it's not. This is about respect. This is about recognizing that I've worked my ass off to get where I am. And you can't just keep using me when things don't go your way. Jason took a step forward, hands held out, pleading. Mark, come on, don't do this. We're family. You've got to understand, this isn't just about the money. It's about, no, Jason, I cut him off. My tone hard now. It's always been about the money for you. The second you thought I'd pay, you stopped considering me as a person. You saw me as an ATM. I could see Jason's face redden as he struggled for words, his mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. It was as if he couldn't believe this was happening, like he couldn't comprehend that I wasn't just going to fold under pressure. I glanced at my mom, who was looking more frantic now. Her eyes darted between me and the restaurant, probably wondering if I was going to come back in and solve the problem for them. But I wasn't. Not this time. You've made your bed, now you lie in it, I said, turning away. I'm done here. Before they could say anything else, I opened the door to my car and slid in. I started the engine, the low hum of the car filling the silence between us. I could see their figures in my rearview mirror, still standing there, frozen in disbelief. But I wasn't about to feel bad for them. They had their chance. They always had their chance. As I drove off, I felt this strange sense of liberation. For once, I wasn't being the sucker. I wasn't the one who was going to get used. And as the restaurant faded into the distance, I knew I had made the right choice. They had pushed too far. Now it was time for them to face the consequences of their actions. I hadn't gotten far when my phone buzzed, and I knew instantly it was them. I didn't bother answering. Let them call, let them text. I wasn't picking up anymore. But of course, they didn't give up. They didn't just let it go. By the time I reached home, there were 6 missed calls from my mom, from Jason, and a text from Rachel that read, Mark, we're really sorry. Please come back. We'll pay you back. Please don't leave us like this. I stared at the text for a long moment, my fingers hovering over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. I didn't need to. They had no idea just how badly they'd miscalculated. I tossed my phone on the couch and grabbed a beer from the fridge. It was quiet in my apartment. I could hear the faint sound of traffic outside, the soft hum of the refrigerator, and nothing else. The silence felt so much better than the chaos I just walked away from. But as the minutes passed, I started to feel this odd mix of satisfaction and something else. Relief? Maybe? It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about finally standing up for myself, something I'd never truly done with them. Just then, I heard the sound of my phone buzzing again. I glanced over. It was another text from Rachel. This time it was short and to the point. We can't pay the bill. It's $3,000. Please help. That was it. I stared at the message for a long time. It felt almost unreal. $3,000. The same amount they'd casually dropped on me earlier, thinking it was no big deal. I thought about how they had expected me to cover it all, how they had planned their night around me picking up the check like it was nothing. I didn't feel sorry for them. Not at all. I sat back down on the couch, cracking open the beer, and watched the screen, waiting for the inevitable calls to follow. It was like clockwork. Not even 5 minutes later, the phone buzzed again, this time with a call from Jason. I picked it up. "Mark," he started, his voice thick with frustration. "Look, we get it. You're mad. But we need your help. We can't cover this. You have to help us." I could hear the desperation in his voice. The panic. It almost made me smile, but I held it in. "Jason, I already told you," I said, my voice even. "You need to figure this out yourselves. You've got yourselves into this mess. It's not my problem." "But Mark, you don't understand. This is family." Jason snapped, his words rushing together. "You're just going to leave us to deal with this on our own? After everything we've been through? Everything we've been through?" I repeated, incredulous. "You mean the years of you all treating me like an ATM? The endless requests for help that always came with strings attached? That's what you mean?" There was a pause on the other end, then a long sigh. "I didn't mean it like that, Mark. Please. We're not using you. We just need help." "Help?" I said. "What I've been giving you isn't help, Jason. It's enabling. And you know what? You'll figure it out. You're grown adults. If I keep bailing you out, you'll never learn." The silence that followed was heavy. He didn't argue anymore. I knew he understood what I was saying, even if he didn't want to admit it. "Good luck, Jason," I said, my tone colder now. "You'll need it." I hung up before he could say anything else. The rest of the night passed quietly. I enjoyed my beer, put on a movie, and let everything unfold. Sure enough, I got one last text from my mom, reading, "Mark, please. If you're still upset, we'll make it up to you. Just please come back and pay the bill." But I didn't reply. They were on their own now. The next day, I learned they hadn't been able to pay the bill and had to make some embarrassing calls to their own friends for help. I heard they even had to take out a loan to cover part of it. The worst part? The manager of the restaurant had called them out for trying to play the family card and using people to cover their irresponsible spending. They were humiliated. And me? I didn't feel an ounce of guilt. In the end, the real payoff wasn't the money or the satisfaction of watching them struggle. It was the fact that for once, I had taken control. I had finally drawn the line. And that was worth way more than any meal I could have paid for. I wasn't going to be their fool anymore. I had learned the hard way that sometimes the best way to love family was to let them stand on their own 2 feet, even if it meant they'd fall flat. I'd done my part. Now, it was their turn to figure it out. My name is Eli. I'm 33, and I've always been the kind of guy who remembers birthdays, shows up with a gift, and offers to help clean up even if I wasn't the one who made the mess. My family has never made that easy. I'm not the black sheep exactly, more like the invisible one. I'm not dramatic or loud, and I've never had a big falling out with anyone. But over the years, I felt the slow, quiet burn of being edged out. Little things. Group chats I wasn't added to. Inside jokes I didn't understand. Family photos where I was mysteriously absent even though I'd been there, standing just off to the side. I always gave them the benefit of the doubt. They forgot. I'd tell myself. It wasn't personal. I held on to that narrative longer than I should have. I guess part of me thought if I just kept showing up, being helpful, staying kind, they'd eventually see me again. The thing about being excluded quietly is it gives people plausible deniability. And that's the worst part. No one has to say, "You're not wanted." They just make it so you stop expecting an invite. So last month, I was at my nephew Liam's 7th birthday party, my sister's kid. I brought him a Lego Star Wars set he'd been begging for and even helped him build the first half of it. I stayed after the party while the other adults cleared out and helped wash dishes while my sister scrolled through her phone. Casual conversation, small talk, nothing off. It felt normal. Like maybe, just maybe, things were leveling out. So when I said, "Can't wait for the big family dinner tomorrow. Looking forward to catching up with everyone," it was with total sincerity. My cousin Tara froze mid-bite of leftover cake. Then she burst into laughter. "Wait, you don't know? That was yesterday." My stomach dropped, and I turned to my aunt across the kitchen, half hoping this was a bad joke. But no, she pulled out her phone without hesitation. She had photos. A long table set up at my parents' backyard. Fairy lights, champagne glasses, everyone dressed up. To my horror, even extended family I hadn't seen in years were there. Toasts, speeches, kids playing, group shots. It wasn't some thrown-together backyard barbecue, it was the family dinner. The one my mom hosts every summer, the one that's basically a reunion. My aunt started swiping through the gallery like she was showing me vacation photos. Oh, this one was right before the dessert. That's when your mom gave her little speech about being surrounded by all her blessings. She said that last part slowly. I was starting to me like she realized, too late, that maybe I shouldn't be hearing this. But the moment was already poisoned. My face went hot. My mouth was dry. And then my sister, who hadn't said a word until now, looked up from drying a plate and muttered, "Maybe take the hint next time." Just like that. I didn't say anything. I didn't even move. I just stood there for a few seconds, watching her casually wipe down a serving tray like she hadn't just stabbed me in the chest. The room suddenly felt airless. I put down the sponge, walked to the living room, picked up the envelope with Liam's birthday card and the extra gift card I'd slipped in as a surprise. And I left. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. Take the hint. I played them back again and again. The way she said it, not angrily, not with malice. Just tired, like it had been a long time coming. Like I was some clueless outsider who hadn't taken the message despite the increasingly obvious signs. Like I was a burden for still believing I had a place. I'll admit it, I cried in my car. I'm not proud of it, but I'm not ashamed either. It wasn't about missing the dinner, it was about the final clarity. The unmistakable confirmation that I wasn't one of them anymore. That I'd become, at best, a distant obligation. That night, I couldn't sleep. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking through years of slights I'd brushed off. The time they told me the Christmas dinner was just immediate family, and then posted group photos with people I barely recognized. The group chats I only found out about through screenshots. The forgotten birthday wishes. The jokes that I never quite got because they'd happened in rooms I wasn't invited into. But here's the thing. I'm not someone who seeks revenge. I'm not petty. I don't want to get back at anyone. What I wanted, what I needed, was to finally be done. No more hoping. No more showing up. No more handing out grace like candy, praying it'd buy me a seat at the table. I started planning something that night. Not revenge, at least, not in the usual sense. Something more permanent. Something they wouldn't see coming, because they never see me at all. The first step was financial. You see, for the past few years, I've been doing well. I work in IT, and while I'm not a millionaire, I've made smart investments, especially in the last few years when I got into property management. No one really asks me about my life, so they don't know I own 3 rental homes now. They don't know I've been helping my parents quietly cover things like roof repairs and plumbing issues through anonymous grants I set up through my LLC. I never needed credit for it. I just wanted to support them. Because they're my parents. Or, they were. A week after the birthday party, I got a call from my mom. She was frantic. The central air in her house had gone out during the first heat wave of the season. We were told the repairs are going to be over $8,000, she said, voice shaking. The guy you usually work with said he didn't get the usual maintenance retainer this year. Did something happen with the fund? I calmly told her I had dissolved the grant program. She was confused at first, but I didn't elaborate. I'm sure you and everyone who was at the dinner can figure something out, I said. Silence on her end. I could almost hear her thoughts racing. I didn't wait for her to respond. I just ended the call politely. That same day, I called my lawyer. There were other things I'd funded over the years, college savings for my niece, emergency dental work for my uncle, a part-time assistant my sister used to help with her Etsy business. I had receipts for all of it. None of them knew I'd tied those funds to clauses and agreements, and none of them knew those clauses could be canceled with a single signature. I signed, sent the letters, froze the accounts. It took about 2 weeks for the ripple to hit. My inbox flooded. Calls, messages, missed FaceTimes. One from my cousin that just said, "What is going on?" But I didn't respond. And then came the family group chat. Not the one I'd been excluded from, the old one. The one I had created 5 years ago when Grandpa passed and everyone wanted to coordinate funeral logistics. I still had admin rights. I renamed the chat to maybe take the hint, and then, one by one, removed every single member. I didn't say a word, just silence. But that was only the beginning, because there was still one thing I hadn't taken back. And once I did, it changed everything. The thing I hadn't taken back yet, the one thread still tethering me to them, was the lake house. It wasn't technically mine. Not fully. It belonged to my grandparents, then passed down jointly to my mom and her sister, my Aunt Val. After Val passed, her half went to my cousin Tara, the same cousin who laughed at me about missing the family dinner. Years ago, when my mom fell behind on some payments, I quietly bought out her share. Legally, I owned 50%. But no one ever updated the family's mental scorecard. They still treated it like grandma's place. Everyone used it freely, weekends, holidays, even full summers. And I let them. For years. I never booked it for myself. Never once said no when someone wanted to use it. I even paid for the new dock last summer. Quietly. Without credit. But now? Now the lake house was a stage. And I had the script. I waited for Memorial Day weekend, when the whole family usually flooded in. It had been tradition for over a decade. Barbecues. Bonfires. The kids fishing off the pier while the adults got tipsy on cheap drinks and louder as the sun set. I used to love it. But I hadn't been invited the last 3 years. This time, though, I didn't need an invite. I just needed to show up. 3 days before the weekend, I filed the paperwork to restrict shared access to my half of the property, thanks to a little-known clause in the deed that allowed either owner to petition use if conflict arose. My lawyer made it airtight. I wasn't blocking them from using the house. I was just requiring a co-owner agreement to do so. Tara, of course, hadn't been paying attention to any of the legal mail. Too used to me being nice Eli. Friday morning, I drove up early, unlocked the house, parked my truck sideways in the driveway so no one could pull in behind me. Then I waited. It didn't take long. Around noon, 3 cars rolled up. My sister, Tara, and my mom, plus the kids and spouses. They were laughing until they saw me. Tara stepped out first. "You're here?" she said, voice tight. I smiled. "It's Memorial Day. Thought I'd enjoy the lake." She walked right up to me, arms crossed. "Well, we plan to stay the weekend." I told Mom she could have the master. "That's going to be a problem," I said, not unkindly. "The house is locked for co-owner review. You would have seen the notice if you opened your mail." She blinked, confused. "What notice?" My sister chimed in, already irritated. "Eli, don't be dramatic. We've been coming here forever. Just because you weren't invited to one dinner." I held up a hand. "Calm. It wasn't one dinner. And it wasn't about the dinner. It's about respect. Something this family stopped giving a long time ago." My mom finally approached, her voice quiet. "Eli, honey, we didn't mean to hurt you. It was just, things got busy. You know how it is." I looked at her, and for a second, I almost softened. Almost. But then I remembered every time she'd defended my sister's cruelty, laughed off exclusion like it was a misunderstanding, or played peacemaker by asking me to be the bigger person. Again. And again. "I know exactly how it is," I said. "Which is why I'm here now. This house isn't a shared vacation spot anymore. If you want access, we draft a new agreement. We split maintenance. We rotate usage. Or," I shrugged, "we sell." "You wouldn't dare," Tara said, voice rising. "You destroy the family tradition over what? Hurt feelings?" I met her gaze, steady. "No. You already destroyed the family part. I'm just handling the paperwork." They tried yelling, pleading, guilt-tripping. My mom teared up. My sister called me selfish. Tara threatened to sue. But it didn't matter. I had everything documented. The messages. The receipts. The clause in the deed. In the silence I'd been drowning in for years, that was finally gone. In its place was clarity. Cold, clear, and necessary. Eventually, they left. Not without a few final words thrown at my back. But I didn't flinch. I stood on that porch until the cars disappeared down the gravel road. Then I went inside, opened a beer, and sat in the old rocking chair Grandma used to use. That night, I lit a fire in the pit out back. Watched the embers rise into the sky like sparks from some forgotten 4th of July. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt like I belonged somewhere. But the final part? That came the next morning. Because I wasn't done. I had something else to send. And once they opened it, they'd realize the real consequences hadn't even started yet. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of birds and nothing else. No kids screaming on the dock, no blaring Bluetooth speakers from the porch, no smell of my sister's always overcooked bacon. Just stillness. It was almost eerie how peaceful it was. And I liked it. I brewed myself a cup of coffee, walked barefoot down to the water, and watched the early mist curl off the surface like steam from a boiling secret. I had a lot on my mind, but I wasn't sad. Just focused. Resolved. The night before had been a line in the sand. But now? Now it was time to make it permanent. Before I left for the city, I stopped by the post office in town and handed over a thick manila envelope addressed to my family lawyer. Inside was the final piece of the puzzle, my formal decision to sell my half of the lake house. Not just to anyone, but to a buyer I'd already vetted. A private couple from out of state, No kids, no drama, just retirees who wanted a quiet escape for the summer months. I'd even offered them a slightly better deal if they agreed to one condition. They'd put up a gate. Not a huge one, just enough to clearly mark their half and legally prevent any accidental visits from extended family members who had once treated the house like their personal vacation hub. But the envelope didn't just include the sale contract. It also contained my exit letter, a single page folded on top of the documents, addressed to my entire family. I wrote it slowly, carefully, over 2 nights. I didn't want to be cruel, I just wanted to be honest. Brutally, surgically honest. Here's a part of what it said. To everyone who forgot me, you may not have realized it, but over the years, I became a ghost in this family. Not because I drifted away, but because you quietly pushed me there. With your exclusions, your silence, your smug smirks when I'd show up still believing I mattered. I was the helper, the giver, the quiet one, that extra at the table. I never asked for much, just a chair and a little kindness. But your message has been clear. I'm not family. I'm a resource, a wallet, an afterthought, a punchline. So now, I'm taking the hint. You won't have to forget to invite me anymore. You won't have to roll your eyes when I show up or whisper in the kitchen when I leave the room. I'm done with all of it. I'm not angry. I'm not vengeful. I'm simply done. This house? It was the last place where I still felt tethered to any kind of belonging. And now, I've let it go. The buyers are sweet. They'll take care of it. And don't worry, they won't tolerate uninvited guests. Not even on holidays. Consider this letter your official notice. I'm no longer available for guilt, gaslighting, or group chats. I wish you all well. Truly. But from now on, my peace comes first. Eli. 3 days later, my phone buzzed nonstop. Missed calls. Voicemails. A flurry of texts that went from confused to panicked to furious in the span of hours. My sister, who hadn't said a kind word to me in over a year, suddenly had a lot to say. Things like, "You're breaking mom's heart," and "You're acting like a child." My cousin Tara sent a wall of texts that started with, "Are you seriously selling the house?" and ended with, "You'll regret this." But the one that really stuck with me came from my mom. It was just one sentence. "Why are you doing this to us?" I stared at that message for a long time. I almost replied. I even typed a few different things, some sharp, some gentle, one version that just said, "Because you let them." But I deleted it all, because she already knew. A week later, the sale closed. The new owners took over. The family tried to block it, but since Tara hadn't kept up with her share of the maintenance taxes and I had majority rights on the deed thanks to a little-known clause I'd activated through my LLC, they couldn't stop it. Legally, financially, emotionally, it was done. Summer came and went. They ended up renting a lake Airbnb 2 towns over. I saw the photos on my cousin's Instagram. Different doc. Same forced smiles. Same energy of pretending nothing had changed. Except, it had. Because the next time they needed a favor, there was no Eli to call. No silent supporter to pick up the slack. No wallet with feelings, as they once called me behind my back on a hot mic during a group Zoom I wasn't supposed to hear. And while they scrambled to adjust, I was building something better. A life where I wasn't invisible. A new circle of friends who saw me, appreciated me, laughed with me, and never once made me beg for a seat at the table. It wasn't about revenge. It was about release. But don't get me wrong. There was one more twist. Because 2 months after the house sale finalized, something interesting happened at work. My company launched a new mentorship initiative, a paid program where we invited applicants from across the region to train in IT and project management. It was designed for people looking to start over. Guess who applied? Tara. She didn't realize the application would land directly on my desk. And she definitely didn't expect the little note I stapled to her rejection letter. Just 6 words. Maybe take the hint next time. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected. No more calls. No more texts. It was as if, after years of silent dismissals, the silence had finally become mutual. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to fix it. I stopped checking their social media. I removed myself from the last remnants of family email threads. My phone was still, and my mind was clearer than it had been in years. But clarity doesn't mean peace comes easy. There were nights I lay awake wondering if I'd gone too far. If I should have just kept being the quiet one. The dependable one. The one who bit his tongue for the sake of keeping a fragile family illusion intact. That internal guilt had been a well-worn jacket, familiar, even comforting in its own twisted way. But guilt, I realized, is a tool manipulators use when outright control doesn't work anymore. It was hard to let it go. But I did. Because something else started growing in its place, something stronger. Dignity. A sense of boundaries. A strange but welcome pride in the fact that I had, for the first time, chosen myself over people who had proven again and again that they wouldn't have chosen me. Work got better too. I got promoted. Turns out when you're not constantly drained by toxic family dynamics, your brain has more room to thrive. I finally took that trip to Kyoto I'd been putting off for years. Went solo. Spent 2 weeks wandering through bamboo forests and sipping matcha on quiet balconies. I didn't post about it. Didn't announce it to the world. I just lived it. Fully, quietly, for myself. The final thread unraveled on Thanksgiving. Traditionally, it was hosted at my parents' house. A big production. Stuffing recipes copied from Grandma's old notes. My dad's dry turkey. The usual arguments over who got to sit closest to the fireplace. And me, of course, if I was invited, usually stuck at the far end of the kids' table or in the folding chair by the door. No one really noticed when I stopped coming a few years ago. But this year, things were different. That morning, I got a knock at my door. It was my father. I hadn't seen him in nearly a year. He looked older. A little thinner. His once jet black hair was grayer than I remembered. He was holding a foil-covered dish. His eyes were bloodshot. Not from crying, I don't think. Just the kind of long, slow wear that happens when life finally forces a man to sit with his choices. "Can I come in?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. He sat down at my kitchen table and put the dish down. He didn't offer it. Didn't explain it. Just stared at the wood grain for a while like it held answers he didn't have. "Your mother's not doing well," he finally said. I nodded. That tends to happen when you lose control over people. He flinched. Whether it was the words or the calm way I said them, I'm not sure. "She's sorry, Eli. She says it every day." I poured him a glass of water and sat across from him. She had years to say it to my face. He looked like he wanted to argue. Then he sighed and said, "You were right to walk away." I didn't expect that. He continued, "I told her we should have handled things differently. That we shouldn't have treated you like some outsider in your own bloodline. I tried to talk to your sister about it. She says you're being dramatic, that you're holding a grudge." I laughed softly. Not out of amusement, just disbelief. Of course she does. She's not doing so well either. Her Etsy shop folded. She's staying with us now. Your mother's under a lot of stress. And he looked up at me finally, really looked. "I'm not here to guilt you. I'm here because I realized something. You weren't the one who abandoned the family. We abandoned you. And we just got used to the idea that you'd never push back." The silence between us sat heavy. Then he added, "I read your letter." I raised an eyebrow. "The one you sent to the lawyer." He forwarded a copy to me after the house was sold. I read it 3 times. I cried each time. I didn't know what to say. "You're a better man than I ever gave you credit for," he said. "I'm sorry it took losing the house and losing you to see it." I believed him. I don't know why, but I did. There was something raw about his voice. Not performative. Just worn out. I stood, walked to the fridge, and pulled out a small pumpkin pie I had picked up the day before. I sliced 2 pieces, placed one in front of him. "No turkey," I said, "but it's real whipped cream." He smiled a little. We didn't talk much after that. Just ate. 2 men with too much history between them and no real map forward. But it was something. Not a full repair. Not a reconciliation. But a start. And I made it clear, if things were to ever be different, it would be on my terms now. No more appeasement. No more backseat in my own story. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten. From my mom. I read it twice. Then I put it away. I wasn't ready to respond. Maybe I never would. Forgiveness doesn't come on cue. And it certainly doesn't come without change. Weeks passed. I was moving into winter with a kind of peace I hadn't known in years. Real peace. Earned peace. Then, just before Christmas, I got a text. Not from my sister. Not from Tara. From Liam, my nephew. It was a video message. "Hey Uncle Eli," he said, grinning toothlessly into the camera. "Mom says we're not supposed to talk to you, but I miss you." I told her that's dumb. "I hope you're okay. I'm building another Lego spaceship. It's got 3 engines this time." Behind him, I heard my sister's voice yell, "Liam, give me that phone." The video cut off. I watched it again. And again. My chest hurt in a way that had nothing to do with anger. Just sadness. Not for myself. For him. For what he was being dragged into. The cycle of exclusion. The weaponization of silence. He didn't deserve that. So I sent back a video. Hey, bud, I said, smiling. That sounds like an awesome spaceship. I bet it's the fastest one in the galaxy. I miss you too, and I'm always here, no matter what anyone says. Okay. I never heard back, but that was okay, because I meant it. The revenge was never really about hurting them. It was about stopping the hurt they caused me, about putting up walls not to punish, but to protect. And maybe, just maybe, someone in the next generation won't grow up feeling invisible. Maybe they'll learn it's okay to say no, to draw lines, to walk away from people who only love you when it's convenient. As for me, I'm good. I bought a new place. Smaller, cozier, with a real fireplace and a wide front porch. I host game nights with friends. Cook dinners that aren't critiques in disguise. I laugh more, sleep better. And when I see old photos pop up on my phone from family gatherings where I stood off to the side, half smiling, half hoping, I swipe past them. Not because I'm bitter, because I'm free. My name's Elias. I'm 29, and I got married last Saturday in what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. The kind of day you look back on when you're old and gray, the kind of day people tell you will fly by in a blur of laughter, love, and family. And for the most part, it was, except for the gaping, empty seats that were meant for the people I loved most. Every time I glanced toward them, I felt that same dull ache in my chest. Here's the part that still makes my stomach turn. Not a single member of my family came. Not my parents. Not my sister. Not even my best friend, Matt, who's been like a brother to me since we were kids. Instead, they all went to my sister's engagement party. Yes, you read that right. My sister, Alina, scheduled her engagement party on the exact same day as my wedding, after knowing my date for 8 months. And my family chose her. It wasn't even subtle. The invites to her party went out 2 months before my wedding, with save the date, cards that were practically screaming for attention, gold foil, fancy script, professional photos of her and her fiancé kissing on a rooftop at sunset. Meanwhile, when I sent my invitations, all I got back were short, awkward texts. My mom wrote, "We'll have to see if we can make it work, dear." My dad didn't even respond, just sent me a thumbs up emoji 3 days later. I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it. Alina has always been the favorite, the golden child who could do no wrong. She got the bigger bedroom when we were kids, the car on her 16th birthday, and my parents' constant, unwavering attention. I was used to playing second fiddle, but I thought, naively, that my wedding would be different. 2 weeks before the big day, I called my mom to confirm their travel plans. She hesitated for a long moment before saying, "Eli, about the wedding, your sister's engagement party is the same day. It's going to be difficult for us to attend both." I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. "So you're not coming?" I asked, my voice cracking in a way I hated. "It's just that her future in-laws are flying in from Europe. It's such a rare opportunity to have everyone together," she said, as if that justified skipping my wedding entirely. "Mom, this is my wedding. My one wedding." She sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "You'll understand when you have kids of your own. We just can't be in 2 places at once." I hung up without saying goodbye. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. I didn't tell my fiancée, Lila, right away. I didn't want to ruin her excitement. But the next few days were a blur of awkward conversations with family members, each one, regretfully, informing me they couldn't make it. Matt, my best man, called me the night before the wedding and said, "I'm really sorry, man, but Alina's party, it's kind of a big deal. I can't miss it." When the day came, I walked down the aisle with a smile plastered on my face, the kind you wear when you're trying to pretend everything's fine. Lila looked beautiful, like something out of a dream. Our friends filled the room with warmth and laughter, and I did my best to focus on them. But every time my eyes wandered toward the empty section of chairs, my chest tightened. The ceremony went off without a hitch, and for a few blissful moments, I forgot the hurt. It wasn't until the reception, just as we cut the cake, that reality came crashing back. My phone, sitting on the table beside me, lit up with a text from my mom. "We need to talk. Now." Before I could even process it, the screen filled with notifications, call after call. 52 missed calls in less than an hour. My hand froze around the cake knife, the laughter around me blurring into a low hum. Lila noticed the look on my face and whispered, "What's wrong?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the phone, my heart pounding, wondering what could possibly be so urgent that my mother, who hadn't shown up to my wedding, was suddenly desperate to reach me. And then the phone buzzed again, this time with a message that made my stomach drop. It was from my cousin Amelia, the one person in my family who occasionally slipped me bits of truth when the rest of them tried to keep me in the dark. Her message read, "You won't believe what's happening here. Call me when you can. But don't tell anyone I told you." That single line was enough to make my pulse quicken. I didn't reply right away. I knew if I did, she might get pulled into whatever storm was brewing. But the pit in my stomach told me it had something to do with Alina's engagement party. I slipped my phone into my pocket, trying not to let it ruin the moment, but my mind wouldn't stop spinning. I barely heard the DJ calling for our first dance. I held Lila close, swaying to the music, yet all I could picture was my parents, my sister, and my so-called best friend all gathered in some lavish hall, sipping champagne and smiling for photos, while I celebrated one of the most important days of my life without them. After the dance, I excused myself for a quick bathroom break and stepped outside into the cool night air. The music from the reception hall muffled behind me. I finally called Amelia. She picked up on the first ring. "Elias, they're talking about you," she blurted, her voice low, like she was hiding in a closet. "They're saying you selfishly planned your wedding to compete with Alina's big day. Your mom's been telling people you did it on purpose." I froze. "What? That's insane. I announced my date months before she even got engaged." "I know," Amelia said quickly, "but they're making it sound like you wanted to upstage her. And get this, your dad's been telling her fiancé's family that you're not very close to the family anymore, so it's understandable that none of them came." My mouth went dry. "They're rewriting the story while it's happening." "That's not all," she continued. "Matt's here. He's been going around saying he couldn't be your best man because you were being difficult about the guest list. Like, he's making it sound like you didn't even want him there." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Matt, the guy I've shared every major milestone with, standing there in my sister's engagement party, trashing me to people I barely know. Amelia hesitated before adding, "And your mom's calling you because, well, I don't know the whole thing, but apparently she needs you to fix something for Alina tonight. She said it's urgent. That's why she's been calling so much." The absurdity of it hit me like a slap. They skipped my wedding to go to my sister's engagement party, and now, in the middle of my reception, they needed me to fix something for her? I wanted to hang up and walk back inside, pretend I'd never heard any of it, but I couldn't shake the anger clawing up my throat. My entire life, this was the pattern. They'd hurt me, make me the villain in their story, and then come to me when they needed something. And I'd always given in, because they were my family. But that night, standing outside in the dark with the faint sound of clinking glasses and laughter from two different celebrations miles apart, I felt something shift. I didn't tell Lila yet. I didn't want to ruin her night with my family's drama, but the weight of it sat heavy in my chest. When I walked back inside, the room was alive with music, friends were dancing, and for a brief moment, I let myself smile. But every so often, I'd feel my phone buzz again. Another call, another text, my mom's name flashing across the screen like a reminder that the people who should have been there for me had chosen someone else, and still expected me to drop everything for them. By the time the night ended, I had 68 missed calls, and the last voicemail they left made my hands curl into fists. When Lila and I finally got back to our hotel suite that night, we were exhausted, the kind of tired that comes from smiling for hours while your heart is quietly breaking. I was just about to toss my phone onto the dresser and forget about it until morning when I saw a new text from Amelia. It wasn't a paragraph this time. It was just a photo. I tapped it open, and my stomach turned. There, in crisp, high-definition clarity, was my sister Alina standing at her engagement party, wearing my late grandmother's wedding necklace. It wasn't just any piece of jewelry. It was the one heirloom I'd been promised since I was a teenager. My grandmother had pulled me aside when I was 19, just before she passed, and told me, "Eli, this is for the woman you marry. I want her to wear it on your wedding day." She even wrote it in her will. That necklace had been in a velvet box in my mother's safe for years, and when I asked about it a few months ago, Mom told me, "Oh, it's not in good condition anymore. Best not to use it." Now here it was, glittering around Alina's neck, matching perfectly with her designer dress. And the worst part? In the background of the photo, I saw Matt, my best friend, smiling next to her, holding a glass of champagne. I just sat there, staring at it, my pulse in my ears. Lila noticed my expression. "What is it?" she asked softly. I hesitated. We'd made a pact to keep the day about us, not my family's nonsense. But as I showed her the photo, her jaw tightened. "That's the necklace your grandmother left for you." I nodded. My voice was tight. "My mom told me it was damaged." She lied. "She gave it to Alina for her engagement party." Lila sank onto the bed, her hands curling in her lap. "Eli, that's not just disrespectful. That's theft." As if on cue, my phone buzzed again, another call from Mom. I let it go to voicemail, but curiosity got the better of me. I put it on speaker. Her voice filled the room, cheerful at first, then sharp. "Elias, I don't know why you're not answering. Alina had a little problem tonight. The caterer overbooked, and we're short on a few things. We need you to call in a favor with that restaurant you know, the one in town. And, oh, by the way, I gave her grandma's necklace so she could wear something meaningful tonight. Don't make this a big deal. It's just a piece of jewelry. Call me back." Now, I think that was the moment something in me truly snapped. It wasn't just the absence at my wedding. It wasn't just the gossip and the lies. It was that she could take something so deeply personal, something tied to my grandmother's memory, and hand it over to my sister like it was nothing. The weight of that betrayal sank in slowly, like ice spreading through my chest. All those years of swallowing my pride, of telling myself they didn't mean to hurt me, of making excuses, it hit me that they never saw me as worth protecting. Not even on the most important day of my life. I sat there in silence for a long time, phone still in my hand, before setting it down. My mind was already starting to move past the shock, past the hurt, and into something colder, sharper. This time, I wasn't going to just let it go. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the hotel curtains, but it felt muted, like the world had dimmed a little. Lila was still asleep beside me, her hand curled loosely around mine, but my mind was far from the quiet warmth of that moment. I checked my phone. The barrage hadn't stopped. 93 missed calls now, 22 voicemails, dozens of texts, some from my mom, some from my dad, a few even from distant relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years, most of them saying the same thing. "You need to call your sister." Not "congratulations on your wedding." Not "we're sorry we couldn't be there." Just orders, demands, and guilt-laced messages that made my stomach twist. I finally played another voicemail, this one from Dad. His tone was clipped, almost annoyed. "Elias, I don't know what's gotten into you, but ignoring your family on a night like this is childish. We were hoping you'd be more mature now that you're married. Call your mother back and do the right thing." The right thing. As if they had done the right thing by me. That day should have been filled with brunches, laughter, and retelling the best moments from the night before. Instead, I spent it with an ache in my chest and a fog in my mind. We went for a quiet breakfast at a little cafe near the water, and though Lila tried to keep the conversation light, I could see the way her eyes searched mine, worried. When we got back to the hotel, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the small overnight bag I'd packed for the wedding. Among the neatly folded clothes was an empty velvet box, my grandmother's necklace box. I'd brought it with me, thinking I'd surprise Lila with the real thing, but when my mom told me it was damaged, I'd tucked it away instead. Now it felt like a cruel reminder of just how little my family respected me. I didn't cry. I thought I might, but the tears didn't come. Instead, there was this hollow, gnawing space inside me where something used to be. And in that emptiness, tiny threads of thought began weaving together, quiet, subtle, but persistent. I didn't tell Lila yet, but I started saving screenshots. Every text from my parents. Every photo Amelia sent me from that engagement party. Every voicemail, especially the ones dripping with manipulation. I backed them up, one by one, into a folder on my laptop labeled simply, "For later." That afternoon, while Lila took a nap, I sat in the hotel lobby with my laptop open, pretending to scroll through honeymoon destinations. In reality, I was looking up the exact terms of my grandmother's will, the one that specified the necklace was to be mine. I still had a scanned copy saved from years ago when I'd helped my grandmother with paperwork. And there it was, in plain language. I leave my wedding necklace to my grandson, Elias Harper, to be given to his bride on the day of their wedding. It hit me then that what my mother had done wasn't just morally wrong, it was legally questionable. But I didn't slam the laptop shut or call anyone to confront them. I knew better. If I lashed out now, they'd spin it the same way they always did, Elias is overreacting. Elias is ungrateful. Elias is making a scene. So I smiled politely when the hotel staff congratulated us. I posted one carefully chosen wedding photo online, ignoring the dozens of texts from relatives asking why I wasn't addressing the situation. I kept my head down, outwardly calm, while inside, something sharper and colder than I'd ever felt before was taking shape. They thought they'd gotten away with it. I was about to make sure they never saw it coming. When Lila and I returned from our short honeymoon a week later, my focus shifted. Instead of drowning in that hollow feeling, I poured myself into the things I could control: my marriage, my career, and the life we were building without my family's approval hanging over it. The first change was at work. I'd been a mid-level project manager at a fast-growing marketing firm, good enough to be respected, but never loud enough to be noticed by the higher-ups. That changed quickly. I stayed late, volunteered for projects nobody wanted, and within 3 months, I landed a major client that boosted our department's revenue by nearly 40%. The CEO personally thanked me in front of the entire company and promoted me to director. With the new role came a significant salary increase, and I started investing seriously. I'd already been dabbling in real estate for a few years, but now I had the resources to buy not just one, but 3 rental properties in prime areas. Within a year, the passive income from those alone rivaled my salary. Lila and I bought a house on the edge of the city, modern, sunlit, with a home office that overlooked the river. Our social circle grew too. Without the constant negativity from my family, there was more space for genuine friendships. We hosted dinner parties, weekend getaways, and charity events through Lila's art network. People we met saw us for who we really were, not as the afterthought in a family hierarchy, but as a couple who had built something of their own. It was during one of those events, a fundraiser at our home, that I realized how far I'd come. Standing in the living room, glass of wine in hand, I overheard 2 guests talking about how Elias just seems to have it all together. I smiled to myself. They had no idea how much of that came from deciding to step back from the people who constantly tried to pull me down. Meanwhile, Amelia and I kept in touch quietly. She'd give me small updates here and there. How Alina's wedding planning was spiraling into chaos. How my parents were grumbling about how distant I'd become, and how Matt had started showing up at family gatherings acting like nothing had happened. I never engaged. I never defended myself. The silence worked in my favor. They had no fuel for their drama, no fresh outbursts to twist into their version of events. And all the while, I was documenting, saving receipts, photos, and every little piece of proof that painted the full picture of what they'd done. One afternoon, almost a year after my wedding, I got an email from a national business magazine. They wanted to feature me in a piece about young professionals who had achieved financial independence before 35. The feature came with a glossy photo shoot and an interview about my investments, career growth, and philanthropy. When it hit newsstands, I knew my family saw it. Amelia confirmed it. My mother apparently bought 3 copies just to see if it was really him. And still, I heard nothing from them. No congratulations. No acknowledgement. Just silence, the kind that's heavy with pride swallowing and quiet resentment. I wasn't looking for their approval anymore. But I knew, deep down, that my growing success was setting the stage for something bigger. Because the necklace, the lies, the missed wedding, they weren't forgotten. And the next move I was planning would make sure they never forgot them either. The turning point came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, nearly 18 months after my wedding. I was at my desk, reviewing contracts for a new commercial property I was buying, when an email from Amelia popped into my inbox. The subject line was short but loaded. Thought you'd want to see this. Attached was a PDF, high-resolution scans of the inventory list from my grandmother's estate, complete with signatures. The necklace was there, clear as day, with my name next to it, as the designated inheritor. But that wasn't the part that caught my attention. At the bottom of the document was a set of signatures, including my mother's, and a note that read, "Released to Alina Harper for temporary use, June 15th, to be returned to rightful owner." Temporary use. The date, June 15th, was the night of Alina's engagement party, which meant my mother had, on paper, acknowledged that the necklace was mine. And now, nearly 2 years later, she had still not returned it. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just an emotional betrayal anymore. This was a written, legally binding acknowledgement. That same week, fate handed me another card. Through work, I had started collaborating with a high-profile event planner who specialized in luxury weddings and galas. Over coffee one afternoon, she casually mentioned that she had just booked a massive wedding for a client with ridiculous demands. Bride's name is Alina Harper. I kept my expression neutral, but my mind was racing. Alina's wedding was happening in 6 months, and from the sound of it, it was going to be big, lavish, expensive, and very, very public. The planner, not realizing the connection, went on about how the venue was an exclusive estate, the kind you had to book years in advance, and how the bride wanted everything perfect for the family image. Family image. It was almost too perfect. I now had two things: undeniable proof the necklace belonged to me, and insider knowledge about the single most important event of my sister's life. And unlike my wedding, her big day was going to be packed with extended family, business connections, and media coverage. I started making quiet moves. I hired a discreet but highly skilled attorney, not to send a lawsuit yet, but to review the will, the signed release document, and every scrap of evidence I had saved since my wedding day. He confirmed what I suspected. I had a strong legal case to reclaim the necklace, and if I wanted to, I could pursue damages for wrongful withholding of inherited property. But I wasn't ready to file anything yet. Timing was everything. I also began attending more networking events in the city, subtly expanding my circle into areas I knew overlapped with my family's. Business leaders they admired, journalists who covered society weddings, even the owner of the estate where Alina's wedding was scheduled to take place. I never mentioned my connection to her. I just made sure I was in the right places, shaking the right hands, making the right impressions. By the time spring rolled around, I wasn't just in a better position than I'd ever been. I was in a position of quiet influence. And the people I was now connected to? They'd be at Alina's wedding. The final piece fell into place when Amelia called one night, her voice low. "Eli, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but Mom's been bragging about how she's keeping the necklace safe for Alina to wear on her wedding day. She says you don't care about family traditions anymore, so it's better off with her." I thanked Amelia, hung up, and sat in silence for a long moment. The stage was set. The date was locked. The audience was guaranteed. And for the first time in years, I felt the old ache in my chest start to fade, replaced by a calm, steady certainty. When my move came, they wouldn't just lose the necklace. They'd lose the narrative they'd spent their whole lives building. The day of Alina's wedding dawned warm and bright, with the kind of golden light photographers dream about. I woke early, not because I was invited. I wasn't, of course, but because the plan I'd been building for over a year was finally going into motion. I spent the morning in my home office, going over the folder on my desk one last time. Inside were neatly organized documents: my grandmother's will, the signed temporary release, paper with my mother's signature, dated photos of the necklace at Alina's engagement party, and correspondence from my attorney. The last page was the piece de resistance, a formal letter addressed to the wedding's venue owner, the event planner, and, most importantly, Alina herself. It was an official demand for the immediate return of the necklace to its rightful owner, citing legal clauses and including a clear warning about the consequences of noncompliance. The timing was critical. My attorney, a calm, polished man named Vincent, was scheduled to hand-deliver these documents at the venue at precisely 3:15 p.m., just as guests would be arriving and the pre-ceremony photos were beginning. But that was only part of it. In the weeks leading up to this day, I'd quietly tipped off a lifestyle journalist I'd befriended, someone known for covering high-society events, but with a knack for sniffing out the drama under the glamour. I didn't tell her everything, just enough to pique her interest, that a certain heirloom necklace being worn today wasn't actually in the bride's possession legally. She'd done her own digging, confirming my name was attached to the inheritance record. She promised nothing, but I knew her type. If something happened at the wedding, she'd be ready. At exactly 3:17, my phone buzzed. It was Vincent. "It's done," he said simply. "And Elias, your sister didn't take it well." Through Amelia, who was texting me under the table from the bridesmaid suite, I got the play-by-play. Apparently, Vincent's arrival with the documents had caused a ripple through the wedding staff. The event planner read the letter, went pale, and immediately pulled Alina aside. My mother tried to brush it off, saying it was just a misunderstanding. But when Vincent pointed to the signed release and will, The planner quietly reminded them that hosting an event with disputed property could open the venue to liability, which meant, in no uncertain terms, Alina couldn't walk down the aisle wearing that necklace. Amelia's text came rapid fire. She's screaming at Mom in the dressing room. Matt's trying to calm her down, but she just threw a hairbrush at him. Oh my, they're taking the necklace off right now. And then, the one that made me lean back in my chair, satisfied. The photographer just packed up the jewelry shots. She's in tears. I didn't post anything. I didn't gloat. I simply waited. By 6 p.m., the first whispers had already started circulating online. Grainy photos of a tense-looking bride without her signature piece, accompanied by vague captions about last-minute changes and family disagreements. The journalist I'd tipped off posted a short but loaded article the next morning. The missing heirloom, the quiet drama behind yesterday's lavish Harper wedding. The article didn't paint me as a villain. It didn't have to. It simply laid out the facts, quoted the will, and ended with the line, "The necklace is now back in the rightful possession of the grandson it was intended for." Which, of course, it was, resting in the velvet box on my desk, where it had belonged all along. The calls from my parents started almost immediately after the article went live. I didn't answer, because this time, the silence was mine to give. The fallout was faster and harsher than I expected. By the end of that week, the story had been picked up by a couple of other local outlets. Nothing huge, but enough to make its way through the social circles my parents valued most. People who had always fawned over them at fundraisers suddenly had other plans. Alina's new in-laws, who had been proud to marry into what they thought was a polished, respectable family, were furious that her wedding had been tainted by public embarrassment. Amelia told me in hushed phone calls how the tension in their house had turned suffocating. My mom blamed my dad for not handling it quietly. My dad blamed my mom for signing the release document in the first place. Alina, meanwhile, had been trying to spin the narrative online, posting old photos of herself in the necklace from her engagement party, captioned with vague quotes about family meaning more than property. But the comments under her posts told a different story. People were asking uncomfortable questions. Some even tagged me, saying they were glad justice had been done. Matt, my so-called best friend, didn't escape unscathed either. He'd been one of Alina's loudest defenders after the engagement party, but the article made it clear he'd lied about my supposed guest list drama. Several mutual friends cut him off completely. When I ran into him months later at a networking event, he couldn't even make eye contact. The necklace stayed in my possession, exactly where it was meant to be, but it had become more than just an heirloom now. It was a symbol, a reminder that I didn't have to play by their rules anymore. I didn't need their approval, their invitations, or their version of the truth to define me. I never spoke to my parents again after that. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I realized there was nothing left to say. They'd made their choice the day they skipped my wedding. All I'd done was make sure the world saw it for what it was. A year later, on our anniversary, Lila wore the necklace for the first time. We went out to dinner, just the two of us, in a quiet corner of the city. As the light caught the gold and diamonds, I thought of my grandmother, how she'd wanted this for me, and how it had taken nearly losing everything to finally claim it. Lila caught me looking at her and smiled. "Feels like it's home now, doesn't it?" I nodded, not needing to say more. Because the truth was simple. They had taken themselves out of my life, and I had finally closed the door behind them. And I didn't just lock it. I threw away the key.